I'm gonna. Oh God, no! I never do anything for her. Like it's and that's kind of one of the reasons why I want. I mean, I would encourage you to spend a day with me, see how it flows. And we don't, it's 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 15 minutes at the third place, and and then 15 minutes of transportation and diarrhea, and that's my hour. That's how I spend about each hour. Of course, it's open to the public. Come right in. We'll get you a price seat at it. We'll reserve a seat. We'll fucking reserve a seat for you, front and center. Oh, it's interesting as hell. I love that. I love that. There's a there is Matthew Smith Garden Plain discussing improving transparency in Medicare Part D opioid epidemic issue. So there's that. That is that's a 15-minute meeting, 11:15 to 11:30. So that's an hour. But that's it's not a big long meeting. It's one of the fly people who flew here to see me, and he's going to come in. He's going to say a few things. I'm going to say a few things. This is Blue Cross Blue Shield of at 10:45 to 11. So there's the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield, Matt All, flew in, and the VP of Government Communications. So they're an enormous, obviously an enormous player in this world. So at noon, okay, okay, perfect. It's kind of and also yeah, understood. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it, but I think it would be. And so just as, I mean, I'm not going to, if it didn't work out today in the here and now, since we're together, ultimately we will. But I'd like to someday to see me in action, see what I do, and me doing the hearings and pointing out switching gears to another topic for 15 minutes. That's kind of a big part of my life and what I do, and so would like me to something. And if not today, again, if it's not today, that's totally fine. That's a very common mode of how I spend my day. Anyway, again, doesn't need to happen now, doesn't need to happen now. So show up around noon, and we'll stay in touch. Looks like there's a little bit of calmness before that. I'm not just going to stupid hearing. Try to get out of that DSL feature, one feature. If you're looking at the schedule, there's a 3:30. I'm going to try to get out of that. And so maybe you and I have between, both finishing up and the town hall.
But I don't need to bring this any closer to my. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The whole box moves to.
Okay.
You need to move it closer.
I don't.
Okay, well now.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
here. She's got the pen, iPad. Yeah. Do you want me
Is she here
She's
with
here with
the
me.
Music Education Association?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be out in the
And-
hallway in just
okay,
a second.
sounds good. And we'll wrap it up fast so you can be back in time for Gavelin.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right. All right, Fung, I gotta go. All right, sounds good. All right, love you, bye. This is awesome. Every student succeeds at
Committee on Education and Labor will come to order. I want to welcome everyone and note that a quorum is present. The committee is meeting today on a legislative hearing to hear testimony on innovation to improve equity, exploring high-quality pathways to a college degree. Pursuant to Rule 7C, opening statements are limited to the chair and ranking member. This allows us to hear from our witnesses sooner and provides all members with adequate time to ask questions. I now recognize myself to make an opening statement. Today, the committee will hold its fifth and final bipartisan hearing on the Higher Education Act to discuss the role of innovation in improving student outcomes and advancing equity. I'd like to thank Dr. Fox and her staff for their partnership during this entire process. Throughout our hearings, we have established Congress's responsibility to restore the intent of the HEA and to provide all Americans, no matter their background, with a quality college education that prepares them for the modern workforce. More than 95% of jobs created since the recession went to workers with at least some college education, and we expect growing demand for skilled workers to continue for years to come. Our higher education system must give every student the opportunity to be on the right side of this trend, but this is not the case today. State disinvestment in higher education has forced students and families to shoulder more of the cost of college. Declining state funding accounts for well over a third of the rise in tuition costs since 2008. This trend has also left institutions serving our most vulnerable students, including community colleges, HBCUs, tribal colleges, and universities, to try to do more with less. Simultaneously, the federal investment for student financial aid federal investments in student financial aid have failed to keep up. In 1980, the maximum Pell Grant covered 3/4 of the cost of attending a public four-year college. Today, the maximum Pell Grant covers less than 30% of that cost. Because of the rising cost of college, the weakening power of Pell Grants, too many low-income students either cannot afford to enroll in post-secondary education or cannot afford to complete their programs. Pell Grant recipients are 18 percentage points less likely to graduate than non-Pell recipients. Students of color also suffer disproportionately lower graduation rates. White students also complete college degrees at more than 1.5 times the rate of black students. In short, those who benefit the most from completing college are the least likely to do so. To address this trend, we need structural reforms in our higher education system that not only lower the cost of college, but also better serve today's diverse students. Innovation, backed by rigorous evaluation, plays a key role in this reform. Today, we'll hear about institutions pioneering strategies that empower students to access and complete college programs that fit their needs. Our witnesses, including my fellow Virginian, Tamika LeGrand, of Virginia Commonwealth University, will share their experiences with new approaches that help achieve the goals of quality and equity. For example, investing in wraparound support for students, including career counseling, financial assistance, and employment support, has proven to help students complete their programs on time. When we identify such successful innovations, our role as federal policymakers is to support and expand them. The college and high school programs, known as dual enrollment, help students gain college credit while still in high school and can help reduce the cost of college. Research shows that these benefits are particularly important for underserved students who may be discouraged from enrolling from college because they believe they cannot afford to do so or just don't see themselves as college students. Yet dual enrollment programs continue to be accessible to primarily affluent students compared to low-income students and students of color. Similarly, we must ensure that programs offering learning beyond the traditional classroom provide students with flexibility to learn at their own pace. Programs like online courses and competency-based education can provide an opportunity to drive down the cost of college and accelerate learning, but research is clear that these outcomes are not evenly experienced by today's students. We must be careful to not only promote and expand policies that we know, based on evidence, will benefit all students. Congress has a responsibility to explore innovative strategies that provide more students the support they need to complete college and reach their full potential But as we pursue new pathways for students to earn a quality degree, we cannot sacrifice our commitment to quality and equity. And so today's hearing will help us balance these compelling interests, and we want to thank our witnesses for being with us today and yield now to the ranking member, Dr. Fox, for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our panelists for being here with us today. For too long, we believed in the stereotype of college students as being young, bright-eyed youth, fresh out of high school, lounging in their dorms before heading to class in the quad. While true for some, this traditional image of post-secondary education is no longer the case for the majority of American students. Today, 37% of college students are 25 or older. 49% are financially independent from their parents, and 64% are working while taking classes. And yet, the federal government and the higher education sector too often continue to cater to an outdated vision of post-secondary education. This stubbornness in policy has resulted in mountains of debt, low student completion rates, dissatisfied employers, and a lack of accountability for poorly performing institutions. The overall national 6-year completion rate, regardless of starting institution type and enrollment intensity, is just 58.3%. That's unacceptable. The old ways are hurting American students and businesses, and something needs to be done about it. We sit on this committee because we agree that it's time to broaden our horizons in addressing the needs of all students. We've had several hearings already this Congress that demonstrate our shared commitment to reform post-secondary education. And today, we'll hear about some promising interventions that provide students more options in pursuing post-secondary pathways. Options such as dual enrollment, competency-based education, and apprentice-style earn and learn programs have proven pivotal in propelling many students to success when they may have otherwise been ineffectively served by the post-secondary education system. I forgot my show and tell. Riding to the airport on Monday, I was reading weekly newspapers, and there's an ad in the paper for the community college that I used to be president of, and it said, Malin Community College invites high school students to enroll in the early college program and gain their AA degree at the same time they gain their high school diploma. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, and I was so proud to read that. It's just exactly what's happening all over North Carolina. These promising and innovative initiatives seek to define pathways from high school to college and finally to fulfilling high-paying jobs. Committee Republicans acknowledge that post-secondary education marketplace has many strengths, but we also recognize colleges and universities must step up to produce qualified graduates to fill the millions of open jobs available in our booming economy. Today, I hope to hear of several innovative practices that bridge the job skills gap, linking students to affordable, practical pathways that direct them toward lifetime success. In order to aid all Americans, these innovations must work in such a way as to push for the success of all students, including minority students and students from low-income households. Innovation is not and cannot be a loophole that avoids high quality. And schools experimenting in delivery models must not exacerbate the challenges currently facing the post-secondary system today. But we also all need to embrace the change that is necessary in the post-secondary education system and work to support new, high-quality paths to continued learning. As we strive to work toward reauthorizing HEA, it's critical that we don't just rubber stamp an outdated, failing policy. Bold reforms are necessary to put the post-secondary system on track to meet the needs of students. Last Congress, we worked hard to move forward with comprehensive HEA reform to unleash innovation and prepare students for a dynamic economy. To ensure all Americans have the opportunity to prosper, this committee must pledge to reimagine antiquated concepts of post-secondary education. If we do that, I'm confident Congress can support students in completing an affordable post-secondary experience that prepares them to enter the workforce with the skills they need for lifelong success. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. And without objection, all other members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, July 2nd. I'll now introduce our witnesses. Dr. Judith Marwick is provost at William Rainey Harper College, a two-year institution in Chicago, Illinois. Her career includes teaching and administrative positions at several Illinois community colleges. Tamikia LeGrand serves as Vice Provost for Strategic Enrollment Management at Virginia Commonwealth University, where she leads, develops, and implements strategies that enrich college access, affordability, and student success. She has over 15 years of higher education experience focusing on improving college access, retention, graduation, and student satisfaction rates for institutions with a strong commitment to serving underrepresented groups. Charla Long is the founding executive director of the Competency-Based Education Network, a national consortium of more than 120 institutions of higher education and statewide systems seeking to design, develop, and scale new models of student learning. She has more than 20 years of higher education experience in both public and private institutions in the United States, including as founding dean of the College of Professional Studies at Lipscomb University. Mr. Samir Gahiri is the Senior Program Officer at the Education and Economic Mobility Team at the Joyce Foundation, a Chicago-based foundation focused on advancing racial equity and economic mobility in the Great Lakes region. He leads the organization's grant-making and higher education and the future of work. Appreciate all of our witnesses for being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we've read the written statements and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7D and committee practice, each of you is asked to limit your oral testimony to a 5-minute summary of your written statement. I remind the witnesses that it is illegal to knowingly and willfully make false statements, representations, writing, and documents of material fact to Congress, or otherwise conceal or cover up a material fact. And before you begin your testimony, please remember to press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it will turn on and the members can hear you. As you speak, the light in front of you will turn green after 4 minutes. The yellow signal will come on indicating you have 1 minute remaining. When the light turns red, your 5 minutes have expired, and we ask you to wrap up as soon as you can. We'll let the entire panel make presentations before we move to member questions. And when answering a question, please remember once again to turn your microphone on. I'll first recognize Dr. Marwick.
Thank you. Chairman Bobby Scott, Ranking Member Virginia Fox, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today about using innovation to improve equity in higher education through dual credit programs. My name is Judy Marwick. In 2010, Harper College engaged in a transformational partnership entitled the Northwest Educational Consortium for Student Success, or NEXUS, to ensure that every high school student will have the opportunity to attend college and be prepared for 21st century careers. NEXUS is a regional educational collaborative comprised of Harper College and 3 high school districts totaling 12 public high schools to serve 23 communities. Together, we created an intergovernmental agreement and a statement of goals and objectives, a shared organizational design, and specific accountability measures. The goal of the partnership is to improve curriculum alignment and early college opportunities to increase the percentage of students who graduate ready for college and to create pathways that lead to post-secondary credentials. One of the most significant initiatives of Nexus is called the Power of 15, which we developed based on an analysis of college data showing that attainment of 15 college credits is a tipping point predicting student persistence and completion. The Power of 15 was founded on the premise that most high school students should be able to graduate from high school having earned 15 hours of college credit in combination of AP, dual credit, and credit by exam. Senior year should be a time for students to catch up if they're not yet college ready, or to speed up and begin college-level coursework while still in high school. Dual credit courses complement and expand early college opportunities for students in subjects where AP courses are not available, as well as help lower remediation rates. Additionally, the results speak directly to the effectiveness of collaborative partnerships like Nexus. Not only do such collaborations promote post-secondary education, but dual credit classes empower students to believe they can achieve at the college level by already completing such courses. There were approximately 6,500 high school graduates in June 2018 among the 12 Nexus high schools. While the early college attainment rates remain lower for low-income and minority students, they are increasing across all demographic groups. Of the low-income high school students, 19%, or 335 students, graduated with at least 15 hours of college credit, up from 13% just 2 years ago. Among all students, 32% are graduating with at least 15 hours of college credit. Further, when we consider students who receive a C or better in at least one dual credit course, the low-income students, 928 of them, are attaining this mark at the same percentage as all district students, 54%. Further, as we have developed the Power of 15 and expanded dual credit, most dual credit classes are now being taught at the high schools during the high school day. This is important because it eliminates the need for transportation costs and time. In 2012, approximately 1,100 students were enrolled in a dual credit course at Harper College. In 2017, over 6,000 high school students took a dual credit college course. 95% of these students were taught at their local high school during the school day. While the Power of 15 has achieved significant success, the initiative encountered some implementation challenges, including cost of tuition, data sharing among secondary and post-secondary districts, and credentialing of high school teachers to qualify them to teach college courses. There are opportunities for Congress to help address some of these challenges, especially as it relates to cost. We recommend making Pell Grant funding available for qualified high school students. We also recommend that Congress establish grants or incentives for institutions of higher education and school districts to form partnerships such as Nexus to align curriculum, reduce remediation, and offer dual credit courses. Additionally, data sharing is an important component of such partnerships to establish the need for alignment and to share results. We recommend that Congress review FERPA to address challenges that deter such collaborative partnerships which still protect the privacy of students. Thank you to the committee for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Dr. LeGrand.
Good morning, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Fox, and committee members. I'm proud to be with you on behalf of Virginia Commonwealth University, an urban public research university of 31,000 students, which also includes a nationally premier academic health system. Together, we are an economic engine with more than $6 billion impact on the Commonwealth of Virginia. I've spent my career ensuring that colleges and universities deliver on their promise to transform student lives and enable them to pursue their American dream. I see it happen every day, and I've lived it. I'm the first person in my family to graduate college. My education from 3 outstanding public universities transformed my life and inspired me to ensure that every student has that very same opportunity. That's what we focus on at VCU. All of our students have great potential and capability, but they have not all had equal access to power or to information with respect to how to succeed in college. This means that some students get lost in the academic enterprise and must figure it out for themselves. So at VCU, we've transformed our approaches to meet the needs of our diverse student population. Our student body looks much like America. 43% of our students are from minority populations. 1/3 are the first in their families to go to college. And 30% are Pell eligible. Over 86% of our students are residents of Virginia. And our commitment to helping students succeed is evident in the fact that our Latinx, African American, and Pell eligible students graduate at nearly the same rate as their peers from more privilege. We believe that we can completely eliminate this gap by the time our current incoming freshman class graduates, something few universities have done. But this follows a larger trend at VCU. For all of our students, both 4- and 6-year graduation rates have increased by more than 14 percentage points since 2012, and now are higher than the national average. More importantly, 17% of our students move up 2 or more income quintiles after they graduate. A student born in the bottom quintile of family incomes has a 27% chance of reaching the very top quintile after graduating from VCU. It's critical that colleges and universities move beyond the simple academic checklist that existed when we were students and rethink our approaches, putting the needs of our students first. Through several innovative strategies and tools focused on guidance and support, student-faculty engagement, and college access and affordability, we work to meet our students where they are. Our intrusive advising model proactively guides students through a reflection of experiences, identifying purpose and setting goals as they focus on their educational outcomes. We've invested significant resources to lower the student-to-advisor ratio and increase focus on connecting with students to ensure they're fit in their chosen academic program. We also use technology and predictive analytics that allows for well-timed advice and guidance to promote timely progress to the graduation. Our definition of student success extends beyond graduation. We've implemented Major Maps, a unique tool that combines academic and career planning. Students create an individualized plan focusing on their goals after graduation and work backwards to determine how to succeed through skill development, such as undergraduate research, internships, and networking. We've also modernized first-year courses through interdisciplinary, community-based, and inquiry-based learning experiences. Our students develop traditional academic skills in an environment that fosters connectedness, creativity, and engagement. Our REAL initiative, Relevant, Experiential, and Applied Learning, lets students apply knowledge from the classroom into action and service. And students in these high-impact experiences are more likely to persist and graduate on time. So we are committed to providing a real experience for all of our students. That's the VCU promise. We know student success begins in many places, so we partner with every community college in Virginia through guaranteed admissions, articulation agreements, co-enrollment options, and reverse transfers, and we've developed transfer maps to connect to over 22 high-need programs. Lastly, we've prioritized affordability, investing more than $35 million over the last 8 years to build up our institutional aid and award completion grants to cover small outstanding balances to help students. I'm grateful to work in this kind of environment, and I'm proud of our record of student success. Thank you for your time for listening this morning, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Long.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Fox, and members of the committee, thank you for holding this hearing and for allowing me to testify about the role competency-based education plays in creating high-quality pathways to post-secondary education. We really are serving our nation's diverse learner population. While not defined in federal law, the field often defines CBE as being focused on actual student learning and the application of that learning, rather than the time spent in class on material. Learners Their progress is measured when they demonstrate their competence through a system of rigorous assessments, meaning they must prove they have mastered the knowledge and skills necessary for their required program of study. Higher education institutions using competencies as the currency of learning are able to connect, compare, and validate learning across multiple contexts and create pathways for learners. For example, Tracy, she's a 43-year-old daycare worker, had completed over 170 professional development hours, yet she had not one college credit. By focusing on competencies, she enrolled at Heartland Community College's program for the Child Care Credential, where they held their expectations of learning constant, but the way in which she acquired that learning to be flexible. The time it took Tracy to demonstrate the competencies and the context from which she learned it was variable. Tracy progressed towards her credential at a personalized pace, demonstrating mastery of her required competencies. She earned 16 hours of credit and 2 industry-recognized certifications, and she did so in an affordable, accessible manner that was 25% less the cost. It was only 25% of the cost of a traditional offering. Tracy's not alone. In my written testimony, I share story after story of folks that are military personnel, from those that are incarcerated to those that find themselves unemployed and unskilled in today's economy. Typically, institutions develop their CBE programs with common goals in mind, such as how do we lower student costs, or increase quality, or the transparency of learning outcomes, or make it faster to completion, or increase workforce preparedness, or desire to leverage all the learning a student brings. We wanted increased access for underserved learners. These are some of the reasons that CBE programs exist. The landscape has seen tremendous growth in recent years, and CBEN recognizes new members each month as they join this sector. However, beyond a handful of studies, data on the effectiveness of CBE programs is not yet plentiful. Although much of the research is limited to small samples and single institution case studies, which my written testimony shares, the results achieved by individual institutions is quite promising, but looking across institutions, there is still much to learn. With so many new entrants and such rapid expansion underway, we believe we need to test, validate, iterate on the outcomes of CBE under an entirely new federal structure, one that's not based on the credit hour. This will enable established CBE programs to experiment with new flexibilities and for Congress to understand the outcomes while ensuring the quality of learning. While tempting to fully open up requirements to allow CBE to grow, we believe it is still too soon to take that step. We must protect students, assure quality learning, and safeguard taxpayer investments. Therefore, we call on Congress to authorize a demonstration project for CBE programs, in particular to create a definition for CBE. Under this demonstration project, colleges should be allowed flexibility with federal financial aid rules to assess how a new system would work under a controlled manner that protects students and taxpayers while ensuring quality. Finally, Congress should require the collection and the publication of accurate, comprehensive, and robust data to support the rigorous assessment of the demonstration project's success in serving students. We hope Congress will take this next step towards responsible innovation so our providers can continue to develop promising pathways for students. And if you do that, we hope you'll leverage our quality framework for CBE programs. Thank you again for allowing me this time and to be with you today.
Thank you. Mr. Gedkari.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Fox, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify. I lead higher education grant making at the Joyce Foundation. I previously led the Adult Education Division for Chicago's community colleges. The Joyce Foundation seeks to advance racial equity and economic mobility in the Great Lakes region. The foundation gives $50 million annually to public policy nonprofits and have assets of $1 billion. For decades, the foundation has worked to improve education and workforce development programs. Educational attainment is a key determinant of an individual's lifetime earnings and of our nation's global economic competitiveness. That's why it's troubling that gaps in college attainment are widening by race and wealth. In 1990, white young students were 13 percentage points more likely than black young adults and 18 points more likely than Latinx young adults to have a bachelor's degree or higher. Those gaps are wider today. For black young adults, it has worsened to 19 points. For Latinx young adults, it has worsened to 24 points. Shockingly, students from wealthy families are 48 points more likely to hold a bachelor's than students from poor families, also a worsening gap. The Joyce Foundation hopes this committee will support changes to our college system to close racial and wealth gaps in college attainment. A good place to begin is community colleges, since half of first-time Black, Latinx, and low-income students start there. I have 5 points to cover today. First, well-targeted investments in community colleges can yield significant increases in graduates. Currently, only 39% of students who start in a community college complete a certificate or degree. But 4 randomized control trials tested programs that were able to double graduation rates with more intensive advising and student supports. This evidence led a bipartisan group, including 2 former chairs of the Council of Economic Advisors, to recommend a direct investment in community colleges, which would produce 3.6 million more young graduates in 2030 and 28 million more older graduates. Thus, federal policymakers should provide funding to scale community college evidence-based programs. Second, investments can connect community college graduates to good jobs. Overall, well-paid jobs are shifting to people with bachelor's degrees. In the last 25 years, the economy added 18 million well-paid jobs for bachelor's degree graduates, 3 million for associate's degree graduates, and 300,000 for certificate holders. We lost 2 million well-paid jobs for high school graduates. Because that shift worsens economic equality, the Joyce Foundation supports employers who hire associate degree graduates for good jobs. In Chicago, Aon, Accenture, and other leading employers have hired community college graduates. Joyce and others are building the public sector's capacity to meet those employer needs. Federal policymakers could similarly support colleges' capacity. For example, they could build on the learnings from the TACT effort, the Trade Adjustment Act Community College Career Training effort. As the audit of that program suggested, better federal data collection would be required to track efficacy. Third, states can improve the community college pipeline to 4-year degrees. Fewer than 20% of students who start in a community college will earn a bachelor's degree. States can improve this pipeline, so we and other philanthropies are investing in stronger state policy. The racial representativeness of public flagship colleges in the Great Lakes region is declining. Enrolling and graduating more community college students can address this problem, and thus Joyce is supporting individual universities' efforts to do so. Though states and colleges need to lead in this arena, federal policymakers should create stronger incentives for colleges, especially wealthy colleges, to enroll minority and low-income students. Fourth, increasing employer skill needs may mean that community colleges should offer technically oriented bachelor's degrees. 25 states now allow this, and allowing community colleges to grant work-aligned 4-year degrees. Though this is mainly a state issue, it seems germane to today's topic. Finally, I want to touch on education technology. Joyce funded research to see if technology can increase GED and English learner outcomes and got mixed results. Those findings add to a mixed research base generally about technology and college on-ramps. Technology alone may not be able to solve our completion challenges. As this body considers how to improve higher education, I hope you will consider programs that meaningfully close race and income-based gaps in attainment and build a more equitable society for all. Thank you again for inviting me to testify. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Under Committee Rule 8A, we will now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. As chair, I've decided to go at the end, so I'll recognize the chair of the Higher Education Subcommittee, who has switched places with the gentlelady from Florida. Will be now recognized Secretary Shalala.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to address the elephant in the room, and that is AP courses versus dual enrollment courses, because it seems to me that there is data now that shows that we may be able to move faster with dual enrollment courses than we ever were with AP courses, though for parents, they're confused about the two. And so I want to ask you whether you believe that higher education, as opposed to the College Board, higher education taking over the responsibility of offering students courses, high school students courses, is going to move the needle faster, and what your experience has been as opposed to the narrower focus of AP courses. That's my number one question. And number two, what are these dual enrollment courses? Can someone take a science course and actually move to upper division? That has been a challenge. I understand the math courses, but what are the mix of courses in which we know that a student can move when they go to college to the next level? And any of you can answer these questions.
Perhaps I'll start. We are offering dual credit courses where AP is not available, with one exception, and that's English 101. The reason is, in our school districts, students have the availability of AP courses. And yes, they have to pass the test in order to get credit. Universities generally accept AP courses readily. In Illinois, they also accept the dual credit courses that are articulated for transfer. We have something in Illinois called the General Education Core Curriculum at the state level. So all the transfer dual level courses we're offering are in that general education.
So you've got an articulation agreement that allows them to transfer directly into
That's correct.
Illinois.
So we're offering over 40 dual credit courses. We're offering them in the arts, in the sciences. We're offering biology. We're offering anatomy. We're offering English 101. We're offering speech. We're offering several math courses, just to name a few. And they do transfer. On the career side of the house, there's no AP credit for our career track college students. And so I see those courses as giving college credit to career students to get a head start on their college education, and also show them that they can complete successfully college courses. And by the way, they're already halfway there when they graduate.
Dr. LeGrand?
I agree with you. The questions around dual enrollment seem to focus on transparency of information for students and their parents, and consistency of application across institutions, and then students' preparedness for the next set of courses. So a few of the things that we've done in Virginia is really working with other institutions to create greater transparency. So right now there is a 30 credit hour certificate for general education where the dual enrollment courses are offered. They normally are general education courses, but those courses are oftentimes prerequisite to courses in the major, to upper division courses. Secondly, there's also the development of a new 15 credit hour passport, because it is likely that all students won't be able to take 30 credit hours while in high school. So the 15 credit hour passport will allow a very similar transparency for families to understand what courses students are eligible to take in the dual enrollment status, and how they will transfer to the university, and how they fall into the degree programs of the student's interest. I think the next set for the preparedness of the next set of courses, I think there's mixed results across the nation, whether students are prepared for that next set of courses. But one of the things that we want to do in understanding that a majority of our students are coming in with dual credit is to make sure that we have those wraparound supports for those students. And so in courses where we realize there are already barrier courses at the upper division level, we want to make sure that we're connecting students with the appropriate academic support, tutoring, supplemental instruction, to make sure that they are leveraging that credit and making it work for them so they pass the next course. I think one thing I'll mention in Virginia that we realize we're working toward in furthering this initiative is to create a true pipeline for families and their students to understand how dual enrollment courses apply to the institutions they're interested in attending, and to the majors that they want to pursue, by creating an online portal for them to search this information and get that access.
Unfortunately, my time has run out, so I can't listen to the next two answer the question. Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a point that we've put a lot of money into AP courses. We need to solve the problem of how to finance both the federal government and the state government need to solve the problem of how to finance these dual enrollment courses, because they may have just as much promise, if more promise. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Dr. Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also thank all of you all for being here today. And Dr. LeGrand, I could not agree more. I associate my feelings with what you said. The best investment I ever made in my life was my 4 years of undergraduate school. And you have friends, relationships, basic knowledge and skills that will teach you to lifelong learn. And Mr. Gadkri, I did learn, I noticed in your testimony about the soft skills, I've learned at age 15 I did not want to be a dishwasher when I washed 350 dishes 3 times a day at a Boy Scout camp. It taught me that. 2, in a tobacco patch one hot summer, it convinced me that organic chemistry was not that hard. So that's the skills that you learn elsewhere, also extremely valuable. I helped pass a bill with my colleagues called the Forever GI Bill, which is where you now can use your GI Bill the rest of your life when you get out of the military. And the reason I thought that was important was because technology and things are changing so fast, the skills are changing so fast, so you're going to have to go back and learn other skills. And in our state of Tennessee, we recognize that one of the biggest deterrents to an education for low-income people were cost. They couldn't afford to go. So now you can attend any community college in our state for free. You can attend any technical school for free. If you make less than if your family makes less than $50,000 a year, the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, Chattanooga, and in Martin, if you meet the criteria to go there, will make sure that they pass along those last dollars once you've used your Hope Scholarship, which we provide in Tennessee. We understand that economics is a barrier to many low-income people. It is not in our state. We also have a technical school within 50 miles of every person who lives in the state, and we graduated about 8,000 people. Almost 100% of them get placed in their specific area. And one of the criticisms I hear when I talk to employers in my state is that we're educating people on things they don't need. So I think Ms. Long, I want you to comment on competency-based education. And then, Dr. Moore, just for you, Northeast State Community College, which is in my district, has had success working with high school students to prepare for college math. And the Northwest Educational Consortium of Student Success, which your college participates in, has helped high school students prepare for college math. What's been the biggest lessons you've learned from the consortium and the work in this area? Because that's where a lot of kids just drop out. They can't figure the math out. We'll start, Dr. Morgan, then to Ms. Long.
Thank you. Well, being a former math professor at college, I saw students misplaced in college-level math. And when we did the research with our school districts at Harper, we showed them that about 60% of their recent high school graduates were needing developmental mathematics. They said that can't be true, we're doing a good job. But what we found is a lot of students weren't taking mathematics senior year. And they then tested at developmental level when they didn't really need it. So we worked with the high schools, and now 98% of their students are taking math senior year, even though in Illinois only 3 years of math is required. And we've said there's 3 tracks. There's AP Calculus and Pre-Calculus. They've always been doing a good job with that. There is a general education math course, which meets the requirements in Illinois and most schools for people who are not in STEM fields and their math requirement for college. Take it now, don't skip a year. So we're offering that as dual credit when they're seniors. For people not ready for college level math, we're giving placement tests in the junior year to see. We help them devise a Algebra 3 course, which is a deeper dive into problem solving and algebraic thinking skills, rather than going on and giving them trigonometry, which most of them are not going to need. We now have over 80% of the students, recent high school graduates, coming to Harper College, college ready in mathematics.
Just a personal step, I get hives when I go to math class. Ms. Long.
Thank you so much, my fellow Tennessean. I appreciate the question. In a high-quality CBE program, we start with asking what is it a person needs to know and be able to do if that is the credential. In our quality framework, one of the 8 quality elements are your competencies: clear, Meaningful, measurable, and integrated. And what we mean by that is, are we preparing students with the right kind of competencies? So look at what is it that's needed today? How do we design a program to ensure that that is the knowledge that they're going to have when they leave, that they can demonstrate that knowledge, and they'll be workforce ready when they exit the program.
Thank you all for this great panel. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from the Northern Marietta Islands, Mr. Sablon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. One challenge that we often hear about is the misalignment of high school graduation requirements and college entrance requirements. It's concerning that a student can graduate from a public high school and arrive at a public college, in that same state, only to be told that they need to take remedial coursework before entering a credit-bearing program. We hear that this morning from some of you. Dr. Marwick, I understand that Harper College has made intentional efforts to bring the K-12 and post-secondary systems into better alignment. Can you tell us about what motivated this and what results you have seen from them?
Yes. 10 years ago, our college president reached out to the high school superintendents, and we determined that these are all our students. Our high schools are very good high schools, and the teachers are preparing students for high school graduation. By offering dual credit in the high schools, the teachers in the high schools are now preparing their high school students for college-level courses. They didn't know that not taking math senior year was a real problem when students took placement tests at any college. They didn't know that senior year English courses need to be writing-based, not literature-based for all students. And when we shared that, they changed what they're doing in the high schools. And the vast increase in dual credit means the high school teacher's focus is to get students in one of those dual credit courses their senior year, so they are preparing them for college-level courses in addition to high school graduation.
So I see that, and like we also have AP classes where you get, but would this correlation between K-12 and college, preparation for college, would it work also for, say, someone going into a vocational training program?
Absolutely, because the truth is, for people going into vocational curriculum in post-secondary education, they have to be able to write, they have to be able to compute as well. So that's important. By giving them the appropriate dual credit courses in their career program, we can start their pathway towards a certificate and a degree in the career programs that they're interested in, and show them that they've already completed college education and they don't have perhaps very much more to do in order to get at least their first certificate.
Okay, so I guess it does, make a difference, tremendous difference for students to have a clear pathway to a degree and career, so they're not left guessing what courses to take or how those courses connect to future jobs, employment, professions. But again, Dr. Marwick, I understand that Harper College is starting a pilot that gives high school students access to healthcare pathway programs. In my district, provider shortages and filling these healthcare jobs continues to be a challenge, really big challenge. So can you tell us a little bit more about this effort and what led to its creation? And please.
Yes, we decided to start with a healthcare pathway, and we do several things. We offer CNA in our high schools as dual credit. That's the first credential necessary to work and to take the licensed professional nursing or the RN program. Then we ask the high schools to identify students who were interested in our RN program, and they came to the college in the afternoons. We only had 4 of them the first year that we did this, and they took anatomy and physiology, their English course, microbiology, on the college campus. And then, passing those courses, we reserved seats for them in our RN program, so they didn't have to wait to take the prerequisites.
So, yeah, in my district, we have a 2-year college that has a 2-year nursing program. Those students graduate from the 2-year, take the NCLEX,
Yes.
pass the NCLEX, and become qualified as registered nurses. Unfortunately, they can only practice in my district, not anywhere else. But this relationship between the K-12 and to college, the state government is very much involved. The state of Illinois, if I'm correct here, right? That agreement between these the schools,
This agreement is between Harper College and our high schools.
and your high school, so, okay.
Other colleges in Illinois may have similar agreements, however.
My time is up, and the reason I'm asking this is because I'm trying to convince our schools that high schools and our community college needs to align the career vocational education programs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time is up.
Thank you. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Wahlberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this hearing. This is an exciting hearing. I think we're starting to get the concept around here that our education institutions ought to be serving the best interests that we have for careers and jobs, and people being prepared and ready to fill exciting job situations, career opportunities, and, oh, by the way, be responsible citizens and earn a paycheck. That makes a difference. So thank you to the panel for being here as well. Dr. Marwick, the dual enrollment credits that you offer to students may be part of a career pathway leading to employment. Could you provide a further example of one of those career pathways?
Certainly. We offer career pathways in law enforcement, in our fire science program, in our fashion design program, in our advanced manufacturing program, to name just a few.
Okay. And they're leading to jobs, actual jobs in those career areas?
They lead to actual jobs in the career industry. On the other end, we have partnerships with the businesses in our community. We're expanding our apprenticeships programs and have apprenticeships in some of those fields so that students graduate from high school, can be hired into the apprenticeship program. They earn a salary, they go to school, and 3 years later, they have a degree without any debt, plus they've had a salary.
That's exciting to hear, and I wanted to hear more about that. Adrian College, for instance, in my district, in conversation with Google, came up with a plan developing a network now where Google said, you know, we love all of the IT students we get, but we have to retrain most of them. They don't fit. They don't work in Google, and so we have to take on all sorts of educational and training opportunities for them again. And so why don't we work with you? Why don't we prepare your curriculum, work with your professors, and do it in such a way that can be transferable to other schools as well, so we can get the 5,000 coders or IT professionals that come online immediately when they get the Google. We see this with Olivet College, with Michigan State University, working with major insurance corporations and providing jobs for the students as they're working toward a degree as well. How do you develop that relationship with business and industry so that they actually work with you and, oh, by the way, maybe pay the students as they're going through the internships?
Our first advanced apprenticeship program was with Zurich Insurance, and we are just now graduating our second class of students with the AAS degree in business with an insurance focus. Zurich pays for each of the students, pays for all of their books, and they work at Zurich 3 days a week, and they come to college 2 days a week, and that's part of their employment agreement. Zurich's been really happy with the program. We're also doing a lesser number of students with Aon. We've started working with Northrop Grumman now on an electrical technology program. We, as leaders of the college, particularly our president, Kenneth Ender, he reaches out to the community, invites them over to our college to see what we're doing, asks them what their needs are, and we're willing to adapt curriculum to produce those degrees and give students those skills.
Listening to industry, that's pretty neat. I'm sure that's why you're having success there. Dr. Legrand, in your written testimony, you state that 17% of your students rise 2 or more income quartiles after graduation. To what do you attribute that success, and does VCU also have particular employer partnerships that help contribute to that outcome?
When we think about the economic mobility of our students and looking at our strategies, we don't attribute it to one thing. We do attribute the success of our students able to move income quintiles truly because of the advantages that a VCU education has afforded them. The fact that students get to engage in a hands-on curriculum and engage with competencies in learning 21st century skills of critical thinking and problem solving. Through our real experiences, students are able to really apply those hands-on strategies through undergraduate research or internships and work-study opportunities. The students really are able to apply the knowledge in the classroom to the real world. And we find that employers in Virginia, because so many of our students are from Virginia, many of them stay in Virginia, and the employers share the success stories of our students in that way. With the new major maps that we have, one of the things that we realize is that many of our students come to us saying they want to get a good job. And so we want to help those students identify early what career options exist in a plethora of opportunities, because oftentimes students want to major in disciplines for the careers they know, but they're not aware of all of the careers that exist. And so the major maps allow students to be exposed to those concepts and share that information with their families who may also need to know about a broad range of careers that we can help prepare them for in the classroom and outside of the classroom so that they can be competitive applicants for that job.
Good. I wish you continued success. I'm way over time, so thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had the honor of speaking at the commencement at Clatsop Community College in Astoria, Oregon on Friday. And I noted that a significant number of the graduates were continuing on to a four-year institution. And I also want to note the importance of the TRIO programs to places like Clatsop Community College and other community colleges in Northwest Oregon and across the country. So nobody on this committee is going to be surprised to hear me talk about the federal role in education being about equity. We know that many of the federal education laws passed in President Johnson's administration with that focus on equity of opportunity. And that means a couple of things, that no student should be denied the opportunity to go through higher education because of lack of resources, but it also should mean that the higher education is quality higher education. And until those are fulfilled, I think we haven't met the promise of the Higher Education Act, because we know how important, what a powerful force education is, and especially for first-generation students and students of color. We have some work to do. Dr. Marwick, we know more low-income students and students of color are enrolling in college, but they're still lagging behind peers. Mr. Kari noted this as well. Low and middle income individuals are significantly less likely to enroll in college than higher income peers, and federal data released last month showed up to a 50% gap in college enrollment between low income students and their wealthier peers. So could you expand just a bit on the dual enrollment programs, and how do you see those making a difference? And I do want to have time for another couple of questions.
Sure. We still see gaps in low-income and minority students in dual credit attainment. But what we find is they are 11% more likely to enroll at Harper College, and they are 11% more likely to graduate than their peers without dual credit. So we think it is making a difference for those groups.
And is that with any dual enrollment class, or do you need to take a certain number of classes?
We are measuring different amounts, but that's with any dual enrollment.
Terrific. Dr. LeGrand, I was so glad that you mentioned critical thinking and problem solving. I'm the founder and co-chair of the Congressional STEAM Caucus with Representative Stefanik. We know that integrating arts and design into STEM fields is building a more inclusive environment in classrooms, and it supports a greater diversity of students interested in STEM, including girls and people of color. We're seeing a lot of success, especially at the K-12 level. And I want to note, we don't know today what the jobs are going to be when the students who are in school now enter the workforce. So, Dr. LeGrand, a couple things. What are you doing to diversify the workforce and to educate students to be flexible, creative thinkers? And I'm going to ask my second question as well, just to, in the interest of time. Many of my constituents attend Portland State University, which, like VCU, is a large urban institution. So what are you doing to address the additional challenges of urban institutions? And I know this isn't just an urban issue, but things like food insecurity and the challenges of affordable housing, which make a big difference in being able to complete.
Thank you so much for the question. Your first question about diversifying the workforce and preparing students for the jobs that haven't even been invented yet. It's the importance of the general education and making sure that we have a strong curriculum around our general education. We are currently at VCU working on our general education redesign to make sure that we are really fully engaging students around those concepts of critical thinking and written oral communication, the transferable skills that will go with you regardless of what your career path is, but to make sure that we're preparing students to be lifelong learners with actual functional skills to get that first job and then to be able to move on to that next suite of jobs. I think, again, that's where the real experiences are important. Because we serve such a large population of students who are first gen and low income, they don't come to us with the social capital to network and to understand all of the pieces to help you land that first job and your next job. And so those are important to make sure, in addition to the hands-on technical skills, that those students often also have those soft skills.
Terrific.
The second question about urban institutions and the challenges that come along with serving high-need populations. We currently at VCU do have a food pantry, and we also have an off-campus support program and office that helps students who have house insecurity and food insecurities to connect them to local resources, including SNAP benefits, emergency housing, and our food pantry on campus.
Thank you so much, and my time's about to expire. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Watkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the objective of post-secondary education must be to prepare students to enter the workforce with the skills needed for lifelong success. In my conversations with Kansas employers and businesses, one of the top concerns always mentioned is the significant labor shortages that our industries across the board are facing. Higher education is the pivot point into a well-paying job, and our students need to be equipped to step into this backlog of existing jobs. From Congress, our focus should be to smooth the way by enticing pro-growth policies that allow educational institutions the room to be innovative and partner with local employers. However, Congress tends to look at federal laws authorizing education and workforce development programs as separate initiatives. But this is a fragmented approach that results in programs that fail to interact. Dr. Marwick, in the Northwest Educational Consortium for Student Success that sounds like an entity looking to bridge the gap in this policy, why did Harper College decide to join the consortium, and what organizational changes did you have to make to better serve students because of your participation?
We started the consortium. The superintendents of the 3 high school districts and the president of the community college said, let's do this. And with leadership from the top, we designed a structure, data sharing, and we started talking about what our students needed. They start talking about careers in high school. We show them the pathways to get there. Our first success was with remediation, eliminating most of the remediation in mathematics when students go to any college. We consider that a big win, and then we move forward with more dual credit, a vast expansion with the idea that everyone in high school should be able to get some college credit.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from California, Mr. Takano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm delighted about the bipartisan interest in issues surrounding dual enrollment. I served 22 years on a community college board as an elected trustee, and was delighted to see the expertise of a former university president and Congresswoman and former Secretary Donna Shalala. So, you know, I want to, as a trustee, I recall and I gather Harper College is a public community college in the Chicago system. Is that correct?
It's not part of the Chicago system. We're in the suburbs of Cook County.
But you are a public community college.
We are a public community college.
Can you tell me in what ways, I recall the challenges in getting these programs started is the planning resources. Is that still true?
There are certainly resource challenges for community colleges, yes. What we started off with is we limit the cost for the dual credit. One of our districts passes some cost on to students. The other district covers the costs for their students.
So the whatever funding model they use for the K-12, and there's a different segment for higher ed, this attempt to blend these two functions is a source of, I think, confusion for how state governments do the funding.
It is, and it's a little bit tricky. In Illinois, when you have dual credit in the high schools get credit for those students in attendance, and the college gets credit for credit hour reimbursement for those hours.
And so what I'm getting at is that to get these programs started, even though they have tremendous benefit in terms of diversifying higher education and the ways in which not overutilizing the traditional AP path to get those extra credits, the advantages that we see for low-income and minority students to be able to succeed and move into higher ed. Getting these programs started and to expand the number of programs I see as related to the confusion over how we're going to fund them, but also the planning resources available for community colleges and the high schools to be able to work together. About how much money do you think it takes to get a program started if you were to start from scratch as a new community college?
We've tried to think about that. It's pretty difficult to think about the faculty time, the teacher time, the administrative time that goes into setting up one of these programs. But with the outcomes we've seen, we were committed that this was part of our strategic plan and that we were all committed to do it together.
I don't know if I ever put this idea into a bill, but there was a way in which I was thinking about how we could maybe look at the Pell Grant being made available to an early college high school program or a dual enrollment program so that money could increase. So if everybody who was low income and qualified for a Pell Grant, say in a high school cohort or an early college high school, could be qualified for that Pell Grant, that would be a way for us to make sure that we had the seminar, the smaller class size for seminars, for example, for seminar style teaching. What do you think about the possibility of finding ways for the federal government to assist these programs in that way?
I think that's an excellent idea. You could do it in the same way that adult education students are allowed to use Pell if they qualify when they're simultaneously taking a career course while finishing up their adult education.
And so I think probably two things maybe the federal government can maybe help you out with is to help you with some of this planning money. So local school districts and community colleges could work together on that. But also to find a source of money. If you're delivering dual credit and these kids are getting actual college credit, why shouldn't they qualify for Pell if they're low income?
I agree with you.
All right. Well, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank all of you for being here today. It's been a really interesting discussion. I wanted to start with you, Ms. Long. I'm very intrigued by your CBE program, but I wanted to see if you could elaborate a little bit, because I think the more innovation, the better in education. You mentioned that you talked about the assessment, talked about the measures, and they have to prove, that they got the material. Can you talk just a little bit about how that's done? In other words, to what degree is that subjective? Are there tests? Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Be delighted to do that. And Texas is really leading the way in the CBE effort. When you look at the Texas Affordable Baccalaureate degree, you look at the results that we see out of Texas A&M Commerce, where folks that are completing their CBE program are doing that at about $6,000 versus $14,000 for a typical Texas student. So good things are happening in the state of Texas, and you should be proud of that.
Thank you for that.
So I would say when it comes to assessment, we really believe that assessment needs to be authentic. And what we mean by that is that if the learner, you're going to say this is what you need to know and be able to do, we need them to assess in a way that is as similar as possible to what it looks like when they graduate. So if we're thinking about critical thinking skills or problem-solving skills, what does that look like post-graduation? It's probably some sort of a project. It's some sort of an applied activity in which they're having to look at things from different angles and figure out how it works, right? And so that's exactly what we ask our CBE programs to design, assessments that mirror as closely as possible what that looks like in application post-graduation. That's typically not a pen and paper test. I've never gone to work and been asked to complete a multiple choice test, right? And so in a CBE program, you're going to see a different kind of assessment model that's really based on this more authentic assessment strategy.
In terms of the critical elements that you would want to see in federal policy, you mentioned flexibility. Right. Is there something else?
Yeah, so I think there's a whole long list of things that constrain us when we're having to measure everything by the credit hour. So much of what we want to be able to do is have that flexibility from time. Why should time measure learning? Shouldn't learning measure learning? And so being able to disconnect that from time is really important. But every federal financial aid regulation is somehow tied back to that credit hour and to time. So when we look at satisfactory academic progress, when we look at the academic year, when we look at weekly engagement, all of those pieces just keep tying back to time, and it's limiting CBE innovation.
Great. Dr. Warwick, I could ask this of all of you, but I'm going to start with you. In my district, the students are blessed to have a lot of opportunities, a lot of educational opportunities. We have one of the largest universities in the state. We have a very robust community college system, some very large school districts, and that's just in Tarrant County, part of my district. And they all work together. They came together a few years ago, doing what's already been discussed here. But they brought in the high schools. They brought in the school districts. And so they have this dual credit program, which I'm proud to say my oldest granddaughter's part of. She's going to graduate next year, probably with an associate's degree. But the university has committed to accepting the credit hours of these dual credits that they're going to get in high school. And that's one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons that the University of Texas at Arlington has the lowest, when students graduate, have the lowest student debt of any university in Texas, and one of the lowest of any public university in the country. And that's one of the reasons. And in the last 17 years, the number of students that are doing this in Texas has increased 1,100%. I mean, it's having a huge impact on education in Texas. There are a lot of different models for this. And what I wanted to ask you, starting with you, but kind of go down the line, I don't have much time, is what do you see as the most successful model?
I think when we can smooth the educational pipeline by having all of the educational units work with each other, secondary, post-secondary, community college, university, that's when we do the best job for our students. And we should incentivize those kind of partnerships because there's not enough of them. And when we have them, they're very effective.
How would you do that, incentivizing? When you say incentivize, how would you do that?
I would say that advising is very important, both in the high schools and also at the colleges. We're using a case-managed advising system. We're making sure that every student has an education pathway to degree completion in their first semester, and we're seeing higher persistence rates and graduation rates since we began that.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Sorry.
Dr. Grant, if you want to very briefly respond.
I agree that smoothing the pathway will be important for students who choose to start with dual enrollment community college in the institution. One of the things that we have done is partner with the community college, for example, to have advisors at the community college and at the university that share clear articulation agreements and degree pathways that move beyond these handshake agreements, but really allow students to understand exactly what will be counted so that they can make a 4-year plan, so they do their 2 years at the community college and 2 years at the university.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the extra time.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, thank you, Chairman Scott, for holding this hearing on improving equity in higher education through innovation, and thanks to the witnesses for testifying this morning. Although African American and Hispanic students have made tremendous academic strides since the civil rights era, graduation and dropout rates suggest that substantial barriers persist. For example, only 40% of African American and 54% of Hispanic students who go to college complete their degree. Moreover, although high school incompletion rates are improving at 22% and 20% for African American and Hispanic students respectively, they are still high. Therefore, the innovative ideas we will be discussing today, such as dual enrollment in high school and additional student support services in 2- and 4-year colleges, among many others, have the potential to significantly decrease the equity access gap in higher education. Some very innovative educational programs are in my congressional district in Miami, Florida. Florida International University, the nation's largest Hispanic-serving university, has a number of successful programs that really stand out. Among them are the university's dual enrollment as an accelerator program offering credit for previous work experience, a seamless transfer pathway from high school to college program, and pre-collegiate programs to increase college-going students' focus on quality engagement with high school populations and summer bridge activities. FIU has also partnered with area high schools to help accelerate time to college completion, and since 2009 has helped thousands of high school students obtain college credits to reduce the amount of time and money required to obtain a college degree. Another innovative program at FIU is the Golden Scholars Summer Bridge Program, which provides an alternative admissions pathway for 65 to 85 minority first-generation students. And I was proud to hear that this program is helping to support 8 Wilson Scholars who will enter FIU in the fall. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Gadd. Kari, what are the major barriers holding back low-income students and students of color? And why have they proven so difficult to remove?
Thank you. One thing that I'll note is that our nation spends $5 billion less educating students of color in the higher ed system than it does white students. And that's from a study by the Center for American Progress. And that ties into some of the supports that we're talking about. In the community college settings where there are fewer resources, students are getting less support, there's less money for instruction, and that's certainly a contributor to the gap, although it's not the only reason.
And what are the implications of these persistent access and success gaps on intergenerational mobility and income inequality?
So certainly, because we're seeing college become more and more essential for getting to a well-paid job, as I noted, there's significant growth in well-paid jobs for bachelor's degree graduates, and there's some growth for associate's degree and certificate graduates. But as a result of that, if we aren't able to get students of color and low-income students to that baccalaureate level, it's exacerbating the racial and economic inequality in our country.
We have heard during our last hearing that different institutions have vastly different funding levels and that the institutions serving the largest share of low-income students and students of color are often the same institutions that struggle to provide the supports students need because they are chronically underfunded. Do you just explain to us those differences, and how does that underfunding impact the ability for these children to receive a quality education? And what can we do as Congress to help support that?
One of the things I mentioned in my testimony was that there are these programs like CUNY ASAP, like 1 Million Degrees, which works with Harper College, as well as some of the community colleges in Chicago, the Arkansas Career Pathways Initiative. And in these programs, we're seeing both financial support and levels of student services and advising that are at dramatically higher intensity than community colleges typically can provide and that four-year colleges can typically provide. So just to give you an example, in the Stay the Course program, which is run by Catholic Charities in Dallas-Fort Worth, they have caseloads of 34 students per social worker. That's more than 10 times more intensive advising and support than students would get in a community college setting. And so that's the kind of thing that community colleges can't afford. And partly as a result, I would wonder whether these programs that have shown that they can double graduation rates, if we are trying to scale them, we may need to get that kind of support to more students.
I yield back. My time is up.
Thank you. Gentleman from South Dakota, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I think I'll pick up the ball and continue to ask questions about this advising issue. I loved the intrusive advising model that you talked about. I mean, talk about truth in advertising, right? I mean, it is intrusive what you're talking about because people need those extra supports, and they are, from an evidence-based perspective, proven to work from the information you shared. Talk to me a little bit, was there an aha moment, Ms. LeGrand, where you guys decided to drastically change how you approached advising?
Well, I think as an institution, when we think about the students we serve and meeting them where they are, what we often know is that sometimes students don't know what they don't know, and so they don't know where to start. And so we have to be there to make sure that we offer them that support. And I think when our leadership at the institution realized that we had advising ratios as high as 1,700 to 1 advisor, that did not allow us to be able to offer the kind of intrusive experience that these students need. And so the institution leadership, our president and provost, invested the resources, making some hard decisions to allocate new advising positions across the institution to lower that advising load from that number to closer to about 350 to 1. Now, that's still a large number for any group, any advisor to see 350 students, but that's where the technology comes in with some predictive analytics to really help the advisors understand and to prioritize the student populations early, to intervene, to help students before they get into trouble, but also to identify the students who really need the most intensive conversations to help them stay on that right track, that was our aha moment, that we needed more individuals to be able to create this culture of care and support at VCU.
So I love the use of technology because it's easy to imagine it as a force multiplier. And so, Dr. LeGrand, talk a little bit about, Mr. Gadkari talked, he raised concerns about scaling and expense and cost. Would institutions, it's got to be a little difficult to imagine finding the resources to integrate this technology into the advising network, right?
Yes, the technology is expensive, right? But I will say for institutions that find themselves in a place not ready to procure technology, I would suggest that you look at the data, right? Because the technology is grounded in the data, and let the data guide the conversation. Who is really disadvantaged by the support structures that currently are not working for them, right? And go beyond just race and ethnicity, go beyond that to look at the intersection, in what majors, in what departments, first-generation students, and then engage the students in that conversation to learn of their experience, letting the data guide you. Then you can identify and develop support mechanisms and approaches to implement with an assessment plan. And so if data is the foundation of that work, what you will find is that you're continually assessing yourself as an institution, identifying what's working, what's moving the needle, and what's not moving the needle, and then being courageous enough as an organization to decide to stop doing things just because we've always done it that way, if it's not working for the students.
I just love this data-driven approach you're talking about. We should be ringing bells all over Capitol Hill today because that's exactly what is going to help move the ball down the field. So how much of this advising framework, clearly it's about matriculation, it's about educational progress, and it's about course selection. Is there a financial component to this as well? And while you're answering, if there are things that Congress can be doing or that the Higher Education Act can be doing to help with that financial advising, let us know.
So definitely, when we think about advising, intrusive advising, it has to be about the whole student because non-cognitive variables and things outside of the classroom really impact that student experience, and finances is one of them. And that's how completion grants came to be at VCU. We found through advising conversations and looking at the data that we had students who were running into small financial barriers that prevented them from persisting. And so we were able to develop completion grant programs for students who have 90 credit hours. So they're just within 30 credit hours shy of earning that degree, but they were stopping out, going to work, and never returning. And so engaging advisors with students, we were able to identify that to be a problem. We are now moving to a more intensive financial advising structure in the next coming year for that reason, where we will model very similarly the academic advising case management model on the financial side, because we realize that our students need more than just financial literacy, they need financial engagement. They need a partner in this conversation to help them understand how they can finance their education, what resources to leverage across the institution, and how to make good financial decisions so that they can then accelerate their time to degree and graduate with less student loan debt.
Well said, Doc. Thanks very much. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you as well to the ranking member, and thank you for your testimony today. It's been very enlightening. I want to just say that at our last bipartisan hearing, we heard about the important role that historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, and Hispanic-serving institutions play in supporting students of color. I'm a proud two-time graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, the largest HBCU in the country, public HBCU. Taught at Bennett College for 40 years, so I have a tremendous interest here. But most of the conversation that we had focused on the importance of fostering a sense of belonging and elevating the communities of cultures of enrolled students, as well as the importance of setting high expectations and examples for diverse students to follow. Dr. LeGrand, let me ask you, first of all, it's good seeing you again. Given these significant gaps across the nation in persistence and completion between students of color and their white peers, can you speak to what you think predominantly white institutions can learn from minority-serving institutions when it comes to better serving students of color?
Well, I think if we were to distill that down, it would probably rise to two broad topics. One is that a sense of community matters, so that helps students understand that the institutions care about them, that the institution is committed to designing structures that are just for them, right? Understanding their cultural backgrounds and their needs, not seeing students from the deficit perspective or the things that they don't bring to the table, but leverage their experiences to understand the strengths and components they do bring to the table, build on that to develop the necessary skills. And the second thing I would say is that representation matters. Having models in the classroom and in leadership will help students understand the possibilities that exist, possible mentors for them, and that ensures that leadership around the table reflect diverse thought and contributions to the conversation of helping all students succeed.
Thank you. Ms. Long, would you like to comment on that issue? Yes.
I think one of the things that we often do is hide learning from learners. And we're not very transparent about what it is that we hope they're going to learn in a particular course or in an area of study. And by hiding learning, it makes it very difficult for learners that might be first generation, learners that don't have a sense of community to find their way. It's one of the things I like most about competency-based education is that learning becomes transparent. Students are told, this is what you will learn, this is what you're going to be able to do, this is how you can apply that knowledge. They see immediate applicability and a desire to continue to learn because they know what they can do with it. Being able to create a sense of culture and community. If you're creating a whole program that might be delivered distance learning, for example, what are we doing to create a sense of community for those learners? And institutions we have in our quality framework, we ask them to integrate that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me touch on the importance of examples for diverse students and how cohort-based student support models, peer mentors, affinity groups can help students of color thrive, which also creates a sense of community. Dr. LeGrand, you mentioned that your office has developed the You First at VCU to provide targeted support for first-generation students. I was a first-generation student myself. Can you tell us a little bit more about this effort and the results that you've seen from it?
Sure. Our You First effort is really an effort to create a network of programs and initiatives across the institution that focus on first-generation students. The goal is really to increase their retention and academic success, to help them understand habits of successful students because they may not have anyone in their family that have a college-going history. And the third is to make sure that they have opportunities to be engaged in the experience. And we do this, we start at orientation with the students and their families, identifying first-generation students and bringing them together so that they realize they are not alone. We have a summer scholars program in which we have a bridge program for students where they can earn 6 credit hours in the summer to get a jump start on their college education. This allows the students to get familiar with the campus and understand resources available to them and build community among their peers. We have an Altria Scholars Program, which is a delayed scholarship gratification program because we really help the students the first 2 years with peer mentoring support with other students who are first-generation college, and in their junior and senior years, we provide them upper division scholarships to encourage them to persist and move forward. This network really takes under an umbrella all of our efforts for first-generation college students, so students have one centralized resource to understand everything that exists for
Thanks
them.
very much. I'm out of time, but I think it would be great if we could replicate some of these things in our workforce as well. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, one of the things that I've learned here is one of the benefits of a growing economy is we also are creating lots of jobs and lots of opportunity. Because of our success and the hard work of the American people, I see more opportunities for young people today than I have seen in my lifetime. In fact, we have many more jobs available than we have people looking for jobs. And I want to applaud you as educators. Obviously, you have taken on this challenge because for whatever reason, we've had a disconnect for some time between the job creators and those of you who educate. When I go into the district, I have college graduates who have come to me with student debt, and they say they can't find a job in their field. Yet, when I visit all the job creators, institutions, you name it, businesses, they all need a skilled workforce. And of course, we've made some efforts to, from this level, federal level, to try to mend that disconnect that we have. Because, again, I believe the only thing from keeping this economy from growing even faster is the skilled workforce out there. And Ms. Long, I see you shaking your head. So I'll start with, your competency-based model. And, are there particular programs that are easier to develop? And if so, do you have some, can you tell us about those programs, any correlation between those programs, technical skills, and the in-demand, high-paying jobs that are available out there today?
Yes, so I believe that you can develop a CBE program in any area in which they need employment, right? Where there is a need for a skilled workforce. Because we always start with the end in mind. What is it that you need? And then how can we help build that, right? So higher education, owning that part of the role and making sure we have a skilled workforce. So starting with that backward design model, a lot of times we see programs in IT, in business, in healthcare fields, in advanced manufacturing, in some of those really in-demand jobs. Programs across the country try to modularize, and by that, I mean they take knowledge, skills, and abilities and those intellectual behaviors and break them down and can offer them in discrete courses so they can more quickly stack various modules together to create a new program for a new workforce need. To your points earlier, many of the jobs we're going to have tomorrow haven't been created. So thinking about lifelong learning, not as I'm one and done, I have my degree, but I'm going to have to continually retool myself. And as an institution, I also need to think about, it's not just one and done, but it is about this, how do we stack these modules together? I think that's one of the benefits of competency-based education, is helping to create that more skilled workforce.
Exactly, and I know in our business, we look for people with experience. In fact, my mom, my dad went off to war, and she was a sophomore in college, and she committed to work for the war effort and never quit working. And she graduated from college when she was 42 years old.
It's terrific.
And I was so proud of her, and she was a longtime school teacher, and amazing lady. So she had the opportunity to work her way to what she finally wanted to do. But as far as the modularization of CBE, as far as the decentralization capabilities and competencies and the ability of schools to form innovative programs outside the traditional hierarchical structure, what is the benefit of stackable credentials, and how can more schools incorporate this model in the future?
Yeah, it's really about responsiveness to the need. It's about trying to say, what is it that our workforce most needs? What can we do in order to create a program more quickly to respond to those needs? If you listen to governors, you listen to folks that are doing economic development for states, for our nation, it's about how do we get that workforce prepared by being able to stack competencies designed to develop. Problem-solving decision-making looks like problem-solving decision-making. In a different context, we still can add that specific contextual knowledge, but that to us is key.
Yes, I'm about out of time, but
yes.
We're a global economy, and the number one
right.
thing that every business looks for out there is when they locate their business is a skilled workforce. Thank you for accepting this challenge, and I commend you, and I yield back, sir.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Washington, Dr. Schreier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to submit for the record the Western Governors Association policy positions and recommendations related to post-secondary education and workforce development, as they are eager to engage with us on higher education issues.
Without objection.
Thank you. And thank you to the witnesses today for testifying. You all mentioned some great and impactful initiatives to increase higher education student access, enrollment, and completion. And as I was reading your testimony, I found some really nice parallels and similarities with what you are doing or investing in and what Washington State is doing. The Running Start program in Washington is a dual enrollment program for high school juniors and seniors to take tuition-free college credit-bearing courses at several public four-year institutions at any of our state's career and technical colleges. In fact, I'm a pediatrician, and many of my patients have enrolled or are part of the Running Start program and then have gone on to University of Washington or other universities right after high school as sophomores or juniors, and that is incredible and a way to save money. Washington Community and Technical Colleges also have a universal articulation agreement with the state public four-year institutions similar to what you described, Dr. Grand, regarding VCU. And Washington State University has a similar program called Invest in Cougs, Washington State Cougars, which provides students an incentive to save money while they're at college, and in return provides financial management counseling and an opportunity to quadruple their savings up to $4,000 to pay for everyday expenses. And these are great initiatives, but they could be improved, and I was hoping to hear from your experiences about opportunities for improvement. Rural areas face challenges funding transportation for Running Start students, and it's harder for high school students and the teachers in these areas to gain the necessary credentials to teach credit-bearing college courses in high school. So my question is, how do we ensure that rural communities have the same access to these great opportunities, especially after hearing from Mr. Gadkari that investments in technology may not be effective?
I worked at a rural community college earlier in my career, and I started a partnership there with the school districts, some of which only graduated 60 students a year. And teacher credentials are a problem across the country and certainly across the state of Illinois. I'd like to see the Higher Education Act incentivize and pay for high school teachers to get the necessary credentials to teach more dual credit courses. I think what we've done in a number of cases where our high school teachers haven't had it, we've reached out to partner four-year universities who have agreed to offer the classes at one of the high schools after the high school day. In one case, the high school paid for their teachers to take those courses. The other district did not, and not many teachers enrolled. So that is a cost issue.
That is a great idea, and certainly on a teacher's salary, having the universities pay that's an incredible resource. Thank you. Any other? Yes.
And so I guess I think about the opportunities we have as we are preparing students for their careers. I think about our social work program, our education program, where students really have a lens toward social justice and equity, really making sure that we're connecting those students and possible opportunities to impact rural communities as well. We have lots of access-oriented approaches when we're recruiting students to the institution in those rural communities, but wanting to make sure that we're connecting our students back to the communities that they serve is an important part of our experience at VCU, but making sure we're directly impacting rural communities is an important part of the work too.
Thank you. And I was actually going to ask about the microgrant efforts and their successes in increasing graduation rates. Washington State University's Invest in Cougs is similar, but as mentioned today, a quarter of students are parents and nearly 10% are homeless, which means they have needs that are far beyond what even $4,000 would pay for fixing a tire, paying off outstanding fees. I wondered, are there some successful efforts that have addressed these larger life costs?
Well, you're right. Completion grants are small impactful for the immediate. I think a few things that would impact longer term is really thinking about how do we incentivize progress to degree. Are there opportunities for us to give students additional funds as they're making timely progress to degree to reward them for this work? There are some institutions that have found opportunities to do retention grants, and it's one of the things that we are pursuing at VCU, looking into that direction. But I think the other thing is, as we think about our Title IV programs, for example, opportunities to make sure that they're adjusting for the cost of inflation, like the Pell Grant program. And our Title IV programs right now, when we think about the cost of education, between Title IV programs, state grants, and institutional grants, we still have students with so much unmet need toward the total cost of education. And so as we're thinking about the reauthorization of the Higher Ed Act, how we can shore up our federal resources, as states also think about how they can contribute and invest more holistically, I think those kinds of things will help students stay on par and cover the cost of education.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you. I yield back my time.
Thank you. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman.
Mrs. Long, with regard to competency-based education, I hope one of the goals of this committee is to get out of here or pass something that's going to reduce the cost of education, which is one of the reasons why we have this huge student loan debt. And quite frankly, I think anybody part of the higher education system ought to go to bed at night just wondering what they did wrong, that we have so many young people so in debt. Can you talk a little bit about competency education, both the effect it would have on student loan debt as well as the effectiveness in measuring whether somebody has actually learned something in a class?
Yep, two questions there. One, you asked also about costs, right? So for a lot of CBE programs, they've been able to lower the cost of the degree, and oftentimes that's done by the amount of time it takes to get to degree. So if you think about, some use what we call a subscription model, where you pay one price and you learn as much as you can. It's like being at a buffet line, right? And you eat more than you really should have, but it was free or it was included and you just keep eating. And learners in subscription models tend to take more and be able to go more quickly, which is in essence reducing the cost of that degree. In addition to that, recognizing learning that has occurred from being agnostic as to the source of learning and recognizing learning that has occurred in a non-classroom-based setting, but validating that learning as being college level has also yielded those kinds of cost savings.
Would you rather hire somebody who passed out of a competency-based education or somebody who just,
You're asking a very biased question of a person like me. I would take a competency-based person because that institution is standing behind that learner and saying, we know this person can demonstrate and has demonstrated their competencies. They may actually have a transcript in which you can see what that looked like, what that demonstration looked like. If that's some sort of a performance, a simulation, what have you, but you know what you're getting versus they got a C, and I'm not sure what that C means. I don't know what's taught in that class. So I do think competency-based education gives employers, gives the learner, and gives the government as the payer, in most cases, more assurance of learning.
Right, a C in a 19th century literature class, you don't know what it means, correct? You don't know that's got value or no value other than just that some university charge somebody for it. But in competency-based education, you know you have something of value. So it's a superior way of judging whether you had value for your education. Isn't that true?
It's a way of articulating what it is that you know you can do. So your knowledge, your skills, abilities, and your intellectual behaviors in a way that's very transparent, not just to the learner, but to anyone else that would see that learner's record.
And you feel, because different people learn at different rates, that you could wind up reducing the cost of tuition or reducing the size of student debt with more competency-based education?
Let me give you my feeling is yes. I would love to see more data that backs that feeling up, right? So what we see in early data is that it's showing promise that it can reduce costs. I would like to see more data to prove that out, but that would be my personal feelings, since you asked about my feelings. So yes, that's how I'd answer that question.
I think the University of Wisconsin, my alma mater, is aware that they can produce maybe better students at less cost with competency-based education, but they've had some problems with federal regulations. Do you want to comment on the federal government standing in the way of better education and lower student debt?
So when you look at a direct assessment program, University of Wisconsin Extension has a direct assessment model. When you look at that model that's completely untethered from course and time, any of those programs, and there's really less than a dozen of them across the country, had to go through a two-step approval process, not just through their regional accreditor, but also through the Department of Education. And then everything they do must still tether back in some way to time. Those are constraints.
The rest of you, you're all part of what I'll call the education establishment. Do you see a lot of guilt out there on the part of administrators and academia as far as the huge amount of student loan debt and the degree to which they have crippled these young people? Is there a sufficient amount of guilt out there among these folks?
I don't know if I can comment about guilt, but I will say that we watch very closely our tuition, and at community colleges, the tuition is quite low. We've tied it to the CPIU or to increases.
Are you guilty when, say, you run across a 35-year-old with 40 grand in debt? Does that make you feel guilty?
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Connecticut, Ms. Hayes.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses who are here today. Just very briefly, as a very high-performing classroom teacher, I value public education and the work that we've done and the investment that we make in children every day, and I have no guilt about that. Dr. LeGrand, I just want to thank you for your comments earlier about transferable skills and those critical thinking skills that I don't think people have value enough as we're preparing young people for the job force, the workforce. Those are the things that really identify high performers in the workforce. So I think we maybe need to reevaluate our measure, and do more capstone projects and internships and getting students out into the world, because those are the things that employers have told me, in my experience, that they're looking for. I'm glad to see that dual enrollment is being included as a core part of the conversation on inequity and affordability today. My daughter started college with a full semester of credits as a result of dual enrollment and AP classes taken in high school. And my own students at Kennedy High School benefited greatly from dual enrollment programs through College Career Pathways and Naugatuck Valley Community College and the University of Connecticut's early college experience. In fact, our UConn ECE is the oldest continually operating concurrent enrollment program in the nation. I'm proud to be from a state who's led the field in that area. As we continue to have this conversation, I think it's important to talk about how we improve dual enrollment to better serve students from all backgrounds and income levels, and effectively scale up these programs by strengthening the educator workforce. So, Dr. Marwick, in your experience, what specific support services should successful dual enrollment programs provide to their students, particularly students from families where they may be the first in their family to go to college or are not having these conversations at home?
We are piloting hiring an advisor at the college to work with dual credit students in the high schools to help them understand how their dual credit leads to a college degree and what they've accomplished. Secondly, dual credit in high school allows students to take a challenging college-level course while they still have the supports of their high school teachers and advisors around them. And I think that's a great way to start college, because some students have trouble in the first semester adapting to a different structure of education. Thirdly, I think it's really important that the high school counselors helps students get into appropriate dual credit and AP classes for them. And they also need to reach out to the parents of those students and explain what dual credit does and does not do.
Thank you. Also, I want to follow up on a question that Dr. Schreier started to ask about getting teachers who are willing to be dual certified. I am someone who pursued dual certification to teach our college courses at my school, and I can tell you from my own experience that the touch point has to be earlier, because I don't think what people realize is that when you teach a dual certification class, you become an adjunct professor of the university, which means that oftentimes, or all the time, your master's has to be in that concentration area, and that's something that many educators don't realize who get a master's in curriculum or education or academia, but not in the core content area. So I think a valuable route to go is to have that touch point much sooner in an educator's career, to say, as you are considering your master's degree, these are some of the things you need to know if dual certification is a pathway that you would like to pursue. So my question is, can you think of any ways, I guess I just answered my question, of how to incentivize teachers to pursue dual enrollment much earlier? Because what ultimately ends up happening, or in my experience or what I've seen, is that teachers then go and have to get a second master's in order to then qualify to be a dual enrollment certified teacher.
You're correct. That is a big problem. And what we find is, as you suggested, too many teachers, if they have master's degrees, have them in education. So our school districts are trying, as they hire new teachers, to get teachers who are already certified for dual credit. But I think a bigger outreach might be to education programs in universities to talk about this issue while students are at the university. They need either a master's degree in the discipline or a related discipline with at least 18 graduate hours in the discipline for entry-level, to teach entry-level dual credit classes.
Thank you, and my time has expired, but I think therein lies the problem, because if people are not getting the information at the beginning of the journey, they've taken classes, taken on debt, and then have to reroute back in order to get on the right path to where it is they're trying to go. Thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Schmucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been a great hearing. Thank you to all the witnesses. It's been fascinating to hear the work that each of you is doing with your organizations, your institutions, to improve student outcomes and improve our higher education system. Ms. Long, I specifically would like to take my time and allow you an opportunity to talk just a little bit more about competency-based education. May have a question or two. And when I'm thinking about education, I look to the K through 12, some of the school districts in my area who have established some really innovative programs that allow them to meet the student sort of at their level of learning, and then they receive almost constant feedback, primarily through the use of technology, where they're getting almost real-time feedback on the student's specific knowledge on the topic. And then implementing strategies within the classroom to sort of allow students to learn at the pace that they can learn and advance at the pace they can learn. They're still within the structure of the classroom, so sometimes limited by that in terms of allowing a student to move beyond that particular topic. But is that what you're talking about in competency-based education? Are you talking about universities changing the way they deliver education? And potentially using technology as a part of that?
Yep, so yes, and I think that's a good example from the K through 12 sector. And we see more K through 12 school systems exploring competency-based education because of that ability to personalize that learning experience and allow learners to pursue education at their own pace and with the customization that they need. In higher education, it's pretty similar in the fact that we look at common characteristics we would expect to see obviously the robust assessment, but that ability to personalize the learning journey, to look at, say, for example, when they completed a quiz, how sure were they of their answer, or if they're doing an activity and they reflect back on the project they completed, you're able to adjust the entire learning pathway according to that particular learner, which is helping to yield the kinds of results that institutions are seeing in CBE programs. So yes, it has that kind of personalization and the ability to really take a path that's specific to the needs.
Thank you. I was particularly interested in your proposed demonstration project. How would that look? And how would it be structured? And what are some of the outcomes that you'd like to see from that? What would you like us to be measuring? What would you like us to be looking at?
Absolutely. What we say to our member institutions all the time is, what are your value propositions? What is it that you say you're hoping to achieve with your program? And now go prove it. Maybe it's the attorney in me, but I don't believe it unless I see proof of it. And so where's your proof, right? And so if an institution is saying we can allow a learner to go as fast as they can go through the curriculum and also allow them to slow down when they need time, where's the proof that people speed up and slow down? If it's about we can do this faster or at a lower cost, where's my proof of cost? So we think about a demonstration project, we would be asking institutions to play by a certain set of rules, and if they do, they would have the luxury of not having to comply with some of the financial aid requirements that make it pretty difficult for CBE to really grow and expand. In exchange, they would need to collect the kind of data that would prove whether or not these programs work and for what learners and in what context, right? So we'd look at the value proposition. It'd be great to have that student level data so that we can really drill down specifically on what kind of learner did it work for. Was this a first gen? Were they in their first semester? Or was this a person who had this kind of experience? Is it in this type of a program that it works better?
And I'm sorry I'm running out of time, but so is it your recommendation, or do you believe that we would here at the federal level change the rules essentially to allow for that demonstration project? So as we're looking at HEA, is that a potential opportunity for us to do that?
Within HEA, you would create a safe space for that kind of innovation to occur with the guardrails so that we can really check the outcomes and make sure. I think the data is light right now on the effectiveness. That would give us time to prove it. It would also give us time to test a model that's not based on the credit hour. We'd love to throw the credit hour, but I don't have an alternative tested and ready to replace it.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you. I've actually wanted to wait through all of my colleagues' questions because I think it's really helpful, and you've all been great in responding. One of the things that I think is always important with the panel, and you've covered so many issues that expand and help us see why sometimes programs don't work very well because we don't have the services in place to be able to support the student to take them exactly right where they are. And so, Ms. Long, you've I think, expanded on the competency-based education, but I wanted to ask first Mr. Gakari and the others, what's the downside of that? You know, what should be the concerns that we don't go down a road and find out that, you know, we haven't really been as focused on outcomes as we could be, that there are some issues that, whether in the scaling or in the process, have been ignored. Mr. Gakari, could you speak to that a little bit? I know that you deal with equity issues.
Sure, I'll start with that. And I'll say that, you know, I think the process that Ms. Long was outlining in terms of a pilot, we retest outcomes really well, makes a lot of sense. I will say that, you know, sometimes there are things that are innovative, like education technology, that if done poorly, don't do well for students, but if done well, they do. And, you know, there's a recent AEI study on online education technology that kind of found that it exacerbates gaps, that on average it may not be a vehicle for closing those gaps. And so I think it's really a question of implementation. That's what we were finding in our study as well. How can we ensure that these programs are set up in a way that promotes high quality?
Thank you. And Ms. Long, you want to comment quickly?
I was just going to say, that is the exact reason why we created a quality framework for CBE programs, because we had this concern that if institutions with rapid growth came in and they did it poorly, it's going to damage learners and it's going to damage a movement that has a lot of promise. So we really created a quality framework early. We're trying to hold institutions to that framework. Do you have these 8 elements, and are you playing it out in this manner so that we're not having those kinds of disparities?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Long. I mean, in many ways, that's sort of something that we need to be thinking about as we talk about apprenticeships, as we talk about different kinds and how we do that, because they have to be accountable. And I think sometimes when you offer something new, everybody kind of rushes to implement something without having the foundation, and you speak to that well. If I could just go back to you for a second too, Mr. Gakarwi, because we realized that you hadn't had a chance to respond as much, and I wanted to get your wisdom as well. On the issue of Pell Grants in dual enrollment, what's really critical here is that low-income students benefit from that, because we know they don't have as much exposure in their lives, and it's very important that there be some focus. Again, what concerns do you have? How do we make sure that if in fact Pell Grants are used for that we don't have programs that students end up paying for but aren't getting what they need out of them?
Well, one thing that would be important is making sure, since we actually, even at the community college level, even at the 4-year level, sometimes have students who change their minds about what they want to do, and that concern also exists, of course, in dual enrollment, dual credit programs. So it would be important to make sure that students don't use up all of their Pell eligibility before they are able to get to a degree. It would also be important to address issues around college readiness, which is one of the big barriers that students might have to doing dual enrollment programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, the readiness issue, and I think there have been a lot of good ideas talked about. Certainly wraparound services and mentoring is important. Dr. Marwick, you talked particularly about the partnerships, and I'm just wondering quickly about the challenges in doing that. What is the federal role? How can we do something different, perhaps? And you've been very helpful in thinking about the reauthorization. What's critical to you in terms of the federal role in incentivizing?
I don't know exactly how to incentivize these partnerships, but I urge that we find a way, because I know for sure that we have better outcomes for our students because we are working together. And it's hard work. A number of colleges and high school superintendents have come to us and said, how are you doing it? What are you doing? And they've been unable to do it. It takes a lot of effort.
A lot of effort, yeah. Thank you. In my remaining minute, I just wanted to put a plug in, and I really appreciate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle as well talking about advising. I think we need a better infrastructure in high school as well as in college for supporting and exposing our counselors to the kinds of information that they have available that will help our students. Thank you so much, and really appreciate your being here. You've been very helpful.
The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing on innovation in higher education. You've got a lot of great examples in the Commonwealth to choose from. I'm glad. I want to thank our witnesses for appearing, but I'm glad we get the opportunity to show off a little bit of Virginia innovation. And you know, in Virginia, I worked really hard to add to that. At the state level, we created the Online Virginia Network with a partnership between Mason and ODU, onlinevirginia.net, where people who are pursuing non-traditional degrees can get coursework online through a common portal, a shared network between institutions. A lot of times you get competition from higher institutions of learning rather than collaboration and cooperation. And so encouraging that cooperation is helping Virginia to lead the way in innovation. But I'm very proud in my own district of James Madison University, the great program they have called JMU X Labs, where students are given real and complex problems from the defense and intelligence communities, and then they're tasked with prototyping solutions and working with the State Department and other agencies. Programs like these simulate work that students may do during postgraduate employment, and Virginia serves as an example of innovation and of a statewide community effort to better opportunities and access. Dr. LeGrand, welcome, and I want to thank you for your testimony today and the work that you're doing. And I want to applaud you and VCU for the graduation rates that you're discussing today. The fact that low-income first-generation and minority students are graduating at nearly identical rates as their peers. I know that you, through your partnership with community colleges, can attribute some of that to that success. What other best practices can you speak to that you've implemented that help you achieve these results, and specifically to closing that gap?
Well, when we think about specifically closing that gap, we've talked about creating the systems for guidance and support for those students and using data to determine who really needs support early. But the other piece would be about financial assistance to students who are in need and timely financial advice, as well as making sure that we have a true support system for those students with transition. Oftentimes when we think about coming to college, we think students transition one time from high school to college for the first time. But students transition year after year. They're constantly assessing, what's the purpose of this education and why am I here? And so it's important that we have experiences along the way that help students not to just develop those competencies that we're talking about, but to be able to articulate, what is this college degree teaching me? And what product do I have that allows me to showcase that skill? And so these applied learning experiences, we really believe, have contributed to our higher graduation rates, because students are now connected and invested in their education, and they have a tangible product of experiences to showcase employers about what they have learned.
Are you encouraging externships, programs outside in cooperation with career services that are giving students a real-world example of how they can use that knowledge in the workforce and actually make money with that degree when they graduate?
Yes, externships, internships, undergraduate research. You know, we have even found how we can leverage work-study opportunities, for example, to help students do undergraduate research. The greatest challenge that we find in that, though, while we know that these experiences are important, is that we find a vast majority of our students need to work. And when they find themselves competing with interests of participating in this internship that is oftentimes unpaid and taking a paid job, they go with the paid job. And so we are trying to identify ways to help incentivize for students to take the opportunity for that hands-on learning and making difficult choices.
I know this might not be your department, but is VCU being aggressive in their attempt to cut costs, and not just to paper over the costs of providing that degree, but actually to reduce costs internally, you know, dropping courses that aren't used, shedding some of the maybe excess in the administrative departments, focusing on classroom expenses, things like that, to help make the cost of education more affordable?
Yes, in fact, when I mentioned the fact that we have been able to raise our institutional aid over the past 8 years, it has been largely about the institution having to make some hard choices, right? It's not just been about increasing revenue through enrollment and tuition gains, but really trying to find efficiencies across the institution. Just in fact, in this last year, in an effort to ensure our commitment to our priorities and increasing institutional aid, we made about $5 million in budget cuts, in identifying efficiencies and places where we could reallocate funds to really invest it in our students, understanding that college affordability is one of our highest priorities as well. And in this year, we were able to partner with the General Assembly in Virginia, thank you to our General Assembly, to be able to hold tuition at a 0% increase. And so tuition is flat because the state identified resources to invest in the state institutions, the Virginia public institutions, in that partnership, so that students now have a predictable tuition rate for the next year.
It is truly a partnership. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Massachusetts, Mr. Hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the panelists. This has been very informative. So before running for Congress, I was in public service for about a decade, and then I worked in the tech industry for another 13 years. And I guess my experience in both sectors taught me that we can definitely do a better job leveraging technology to identify issues and improve outcomes in any system. Technology like predictive analytics certainly allows our leaders to better understand and address the individual needs of students. And I believe this technology is particularly important because today's students hail from increasingly diverse backgrounds, communities, and experiences, and too often find themselves adrift in a system that wasn't designed to support them. I think, Dr. LeGrand, you gave great testimony about the data that you use to improve completion rates at VCU. I'm really wanting to probe on more of those types of examples. And Mr. Gadkari, I'm wondering if you can share with this committee, and it's always open to anybody who can add to it, what promising models you've seen nationally when it comes to leveraging technology, predictive analytics, or anything else to improve some of these student outcomes.
Sure, thank you. Well, Georgia State has been a leader in terms of a number of innovations to close their equity gaps and increase graduation rates. And they have been using predictive analytics to help them in their advising models and to try to figure out when students might be in trouble, what might be barriers that the institution has created, perhaps inadvertently, and taking those barriers down. So I think that that's a good use of pairing technology with some of the people who can help in advising and support and keep students on track.
Great. Anyone else?
I would just say that we have moved to a case managed advising program, and we were able to get a Title III grant, which allowed us to purchase technologies. We've redesigned the student portal so that students can see their progress towards degree completion. They all have an electronic plan. Their advisor can also see that. They can run a program called DegreeWorks to see how close they are to completion, and if they change their major, what will that mean towards getting that new degree? They can do that themselves. We have a Starfish early alert system that lets faculty flag students to the advisor who are struggling in class at 4 weeks and 8 weeks in the semester. And we're using predictive analytics to note when a student may be going off the path, may be getting themselves in trouble, and advisors reach out proactively to those students to help them.
Great, thank you.
We've identified at VCU a few things. One of the things is, in addition to the academic support system, that our students really enjoy engaging with the technology because the data is accurate, it's on time, and they can access it at 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we have really thought about and engaged in is how can we use the technology to influence student behavior. And so we've launched an app through our predictive analytics tools that allows us to nudge students at the right time. Instead of sending students an email communication with 10 steps that says, do all of these things, we can nudge them and say, we need you to complete this one step. You've been selected for verification, for example, on your financial aid application. Complete this one step and you're 90% of the way there. And those nudges can help us improve our student behavior, right, to help them move through that process. Another piece of technology that we are implementing that we are excited about this year is really connected to early indicators for at-risk populations. So for example, class attendance is important, right? In order to make good grades, you need to go to class. But oftentimes at large universities, faculty are unable to take attendance, right, regularly. So we are implementing new technology to use GPS software to really understand where our students are in proximity to class. And that data then will feed into our predictive analytics software, really to inform advisors to help students understand the importance of going to class, just as getting early grades from faculty and indicators, but to identify possibly students are homesick and they're not leaving their dorm room. And so all of those cognitive and non-cognitive aspects of the student experience, leveraging the technology to inform the conversation is important.
Great. Thank you. I had one more question, but I think I'm going to be respectful of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're setting a new precedent. Gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Stevens.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our distinguished panelists for joining for today's hearing. We're so proud of you and so delighted to engage in this conversation. Before being in Congress, I was a workforce development professional and helped to spearhead STEM education initiatives, particularly in the digital manufacturing and design technology space, where I helped to launch, along with the assistance from the federal government, the Manufacturing USA program, the country's first online training program specific to digital manufacturing and design technologies that supported credits in working with universities and university partners. So I love this idea about innovating and meeting students where they're at to complete their post-secondary degrees, and what so many of you have been a part of. I represent a district in southeastern Michigan, and College Promise programs, which cover students' tuition and fees, have become increasingly popular in recent years. Students in Michigan have been given incredible opportunities through the Kalamazoo Promise and the Detroit Promise. And College Promise programs do a great job of expanding college access, but not all of them address college success when students enroll in college. And research done by the MDRC in Detroit has found that adding evidence-based support services such as coaching and financial incentives on top of existing Promise programs is an effective way to help students not only enroll in college, but stay in school and accelerate their progress toward earning a degree. And so, Dr. Moorick, I'd love to ask you, what impact has the Harper College Promise Scholarship had on students, and would it be useful to provide additional support services to Harper College Promise students?
The first Harper College Promise class begins in the fall. We started registering students, getting them to sign up for it when they were freshmen in high school. So the first students have gone through 4 years of high school. We asked them to earn the scholarship by doing a couple of things: having really good attendance in high school, doing a little bit of community service, taking rigorous high school classes, and being college ready when they graduate from high school. We'll see, we have 600 students still eligible that we expect to enroll next year. As far as the supports, absolutely, they would be very essential. We hope the students in our Promise program have habits of mind through the Promise program that will make them successful at any college. We have used 1 million degrees in the Chicago area, which is very much like what's being done in the Detroit Promise, ASAP, and what was done in some of the Ohio schools. We have found, and University of Chicago Urban Labs is doing a controlled randomized study of the outcomes, and we still need to wait a couple years to see, but right now we have significance in graduation rates, significance in persistence, and Harper College has found we have a 60 student per advisor ratio in that, and students in the program are also given $250 in incentives 3 times during the college year if they have done all the right things that they were supposed to do. See tutoring, attend your classes, meet with your advisor, etc. We have had really good outcomes.
Well, I admire and just love the work that all of you do so much. And I was just wondering if we could kind of open this up to the rest of the panel to chime in about designing support programs or supports that go beyond just covering the cost of tuition. We can start with you, Dr. LeGrand.
So at VCU, we do have some support systems. We mentioned the food pantry, for example, and off-campus support services to really help students with housing insecurity, to connect them to the right resources, as well as federal and state resources to help students who find themselves in emergency circumstances. There is one unique institution that has a program, a food scholarship program, for example, in Texas, that's partnered with the food bank, and it allows students to get a food scholarship that connects with based upon the number of credit hours they're enrolled in the institution. And they use that food scholarship in the food pantry on their campus, where it's a declining balance. That food pantry is just as fancy as a grocery store. They have produce and canned goods and meats, As we think about the complications we have with our student population in needing resources beyond just tuition and fees, we won't be able to just food pantry our way out of this, right? We have to think of new innovative strategies that really show the students that we have support mechanisms for them on our campus and we're connected to the community. And so I think the more creative we can get as institutions allow us to do that.
Well, I'm over time, but I just want to thank you all, and I'd also now like to just ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record an evaluation of the Detroit Promise Path published by the MDRC, a research organization known for its rigorous evaluations, which shows the impact and importance of approaches that combine financial aid and wraparound supports. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the
without objection.
overtime. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and thank you, Dr. Fox. Thank you all very, very much for being here with us today. I did serve on Pennsylvania's State System of Higher Education, PASHE, where we did focus very much on affordability, accountability, transparency, and innovation, and that certainly continues after my departure. There is a serious need, as we're discussing here, for innovation in higher ed. Traditional higher education is not working as nearly as well as we would like it to be. The completion rates are not satisfactory. Costs are extremely high. Some would phrase through the roof. For those who are graduating, many are not skilled, not ready for the jobs that are available. Graduates and those who don't graduate are very much in some deep debt very often. The skills gap does exist, as in our country we do have 7 million unfulfilled jobs. So there's certainly work to do. My questions today will focus on the importance of accountability from an academic and financial advising standpoint, and ensuring that any innovation in higher ed continues to be accessible to students in rural communities. As my district, Pennsylvania's 9th, is relatively rural, although we have really some terrific higher education schools, both traditional and career institutes. So my first question will be based upon, I have concerns that many college students are not well informed about how the decisions they make can have long-lasting financial impacts. For example, just taking an extra elective or two, as we all well know, can derail a student's path to graduation by a semester or more, which of course is very, very costly. PASHE has a focus on the concept of holistic advising, a student-centric approach that accounts for all aspects of a student's academic experience, financial aid, what their major path is. Are they fulfilling the requirements for that major? Are they doing it in a timely manner? If they're not, are they being informed in an honest way? Is even perhaps the payer, not necessarily parents, but who the payer is, are they being notified? Perhaps there was a waiver allowed to be signed that they could be notified if they were not fulfilling the requirements that were being paid for, which I think could create a higher level of commitment. So, Dr. LeGrand, in your testimony, you talked about VCU's intrusive advising model, which does sound somewhat familiar, and I read the details to the holistic advising. Can you describe what you're doing there a little bit further than you have, and regarding this model and the benefits that are coming from it?
Sure. Through the intrusive advising model, we really focus on two groups that we're leveraging. One is the intrusive advising directly to the student, right? Identifying what their needs are early on and connecting them with resources. And we use the tool that we talked about in the written testimony, the major maps, to help students do that, right? So in addition to just the degree plan, right, the outline of courses a student needs to take, how do we ensure that students are able to maximize this 4 years to participate in all of the opportunities, including pursuing a minor by leveraging their financial aid? And so an advisor is able to have that conversation with students early on about, let's plan out these 4 years. That major map we found, because it works backward from the career plan, has really been interesting to parents because it helps them see exactly what the plan is for their students for the next 4 years. And they have then found that they are able to have a more intellectual conversation with a student who's interested in studying psychology, right? And that way the parent understands that there are career paths available beyond just being a psychologist. The second group that we work to leverage with our advising is faculty. Faculty buy-in is important in this intrusive advising model for a few reasons. One, students spend 60% of their time with faculty. And so they are really most informed about a student's behavior in the classroom as far as academic ability. So for example, in courses where we have high D, W, and F rates, we work with the faculty to understand what are some of the challenges the students are experiencing, understanding the syllabi so that the advising conversation can help inform the student and help them prepare. So those two groups we are really working with through advising. The last thing I would say is that it is truly a partnership, right? Engaging the students in that effort. Advising is not just giving a student a map. It is really helping them understand what their interests are. And if they don't know, then we're giving them the tools to explore that through career inventory tools to help them understand what their interests are and what possible career options, and help them making choices if they're not quite ready. But by the time they reach 30 hours, we really want students to have a pathway in mind because we realize that 4 years will be over before they know it, and we want to make sure that they're maximizing their introductory courses into applicable majors to end with a fruitful career.
Wow. That's terrific. I can see why VCU is doing so well. Thank you very much for your testimony, and Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Trone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Fox, for your leadership and looking for innovative ideas. I want to reiterate, I really appreciate the comments by Ranking Member Fox. I couldn't agree with more of what she had to say, and especially struck by the 58%. That's just so unacceptable. It's mind-boggling. I serve on 3 college boards, and I can see it firsthand. It's disappointing. You know, I grew up on a farm, and the farm went bankrupt, and because of that, I went back to get a graduate degree to move on, and Pell Grants were there, and we were able to pay them off, and I got through, and that led to moving forward in life. But now with Pell Grants picking up 75% down to 30%, that opportunity is just not there. So we've got to keep thinking of innovative ideas, and that's why we're here today. And the dual enrollment, I think, is a really good step in that direction. Over 10,000 folks in Maryland work in dual enrollment in our high schools. And the problem is that the enrollment seems to benefit those in the higher income strata, and they benefit with the college attendance, and they participate. And the folks in the lower incomes, they don't do as well. So it's become more focused for white, for middle to upper income. So this racial disparity in dual enrollment is a missed opportunity. And we need to find models to close this equity gap because these programs clearly lead to higher attainment of low-income students. So, Mr. Godry, how can policymakers and other stakeholders create a system that fosters more equitable treatment for dual enrollment?
Sure. I'll start this, and I suspect a couple of my panelists might have other thoughts as well. I think that certainly 2 of the challenges in doing so are, one is around affordability and resources for both the students and the districts and colleges that are involved. As I mentioned earlier, some of the districts and community colleges that have the most students of color have the fewest resources. So I think that's one element of it. And then college readiness is certainly an issue as well. And one of the compelling models that Dr. Marwick has talked about is having high schools and colleges work together to try to address that dev ed need early on so that students can become college ready and then take advantage of some of these early college opportunities.
Go ahead.
One of the models that we've employed at VCU is a partnership with specific high schools for dual credit that align into a particular pipeline. So for example, our Health Services Academy really seeks to take students who come from lower income communities to help them understand and identify broad-based careers in the health field. But that dual enrollment courses really help them beyond just taking college credit. They also get college preparedness skills, they explore health careers, and we've seen an increase in students participating in those programs, and those students actually continue on to higher education, earn baccalaureate degrees, some in the STEM health professions, several in the health field, and then go on to pursue graduate degrees. So as we think about dual enrollment, there are opportunities for us to impact communities by partnerships with specific high schools as well.
One more quick area I want to touch on. Every year, there's 600,000 folks that should be graduating, and they would have graduated, but instead they're coming out of incarceration. And their average education, 4th, 5th grade. And I know there's a lot of innovative, high-quality programs around the country, but this is an area that I'm focused on and I think is of great importance. Do you know of a particular institution, states, where you've really seen a connectivity point with the community colleges and business also? Because when they're coming out, if they've got some education, if they don't move to a job, we're going right back in again. The cycle goes right around. And 60% 1 year later don't have a job. Have you seen any best practice that I should dig into more?
I would encourage you to take a look at Sinclair Community College. I included them in my written testimony, the work that they're doing in prisons, working in particular in their CBE offerings and thinking about how in those that last period of time of incarceration, how do I get them prepared for a career in which they're going to get hired, right? We know that a lot of employment opportunities will be closed to those that are coming out of that incarcerated environment. I was at Lipscomb University. We also did a program at the Tennessee Prison for Women in which our competency-based program was offered to inside students. Our outside students from our campus, would go once a week, and collectively we had class together. Our outside students, the folks that are on our campus every day as traditional learners, were really paying for our inside students to be able to get that education. We've seen incredible results from that. A number of those learners, initially we started only as an associate's level. I got a letter in the mail from one of the inmates asking for the opportunity to bring our baccalaureate program there, and they did that. And they've graduated with their CBE base degree, and as they're getting back out in the workforce, they're getting those jobs that they need, which we hope will lead to a reduction in recidivism. So encourage you, there's a couple there. I'd say Sinclair. I'd also ask you to take a look at the LIFE program, LIFE, at Lipscomb University as well as two models.
Thank you.
Thank you. The ranking member, Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Dr. Marwick, I appreciate the comment in your testimony that we must make sure dual and credit is an opportunity to take a college course in high school and cannot be a college credit for a high school course. Academic rigor is critical to preparing students for college-level coursework and the jobs that follow. To what extent do you interact with your accreditor to maintain the quality of concurrent course offerings? And do you have any recommendations for how accreditors can help you expand college offerings in high school settings?
Thank you for bringing that up. I feel really strongly about the standards for dual credit courses.
And I do too.
We work very closely with the high school teachers. They come and meet with the college faculty, they talk about the syllabi, and then we follow dual credit students who come to Harper College and take sequential courses. And we have found that they do as well and often better than the typical students that test into those courses. With our accreditor, we make sure that we follow the same standards. We treat our dual credit high school teachers as if they are adjunct faculty on our campus. Our HR office has all of their credentials, their transcripts. We use the same credentials for teachers to teach, whether it's on our campus in that course or whether they're teachers in the high school. Secondly, any prerequisites that are required or showing that you're college ready for the students, every student in that course must have met those standards, and they must show evidence of that. And that's what our accreditor suggests. Also, assessment of student learning. If there is a final exam or other assessment that's given to every section of the course on campus, then that also must be given in the high schools as well. And we look at the outcomes of those assessments, and then the teachers and the faculty get together because we're giving the same on campus, and they share effective practices.
Thank you. Ms. Long, I'm encouraged that CBAN is dedicated to providing a high-quality learning experience to students. To what extent do accreditors take into account your quality framework guidance, and are there particular accreditation provisions in statute that make it needlessly difficult to start and grow CBE programs?
Yep, thank you very much. So with accreditors, we invited the accreditors to the table early on as we were designing the quality framework. We continue to have accreditors who will come to convenings, who will breathe into kind of the way we're thinking about best practices as a national network. So I think we are really trying to continue to foster good relations with all the accreditors. As you know, every one of them requires something a little bit different, and so you can see patchwork of different approaches around this nation and how different schools have different models, and one might require a substantive change, as you know about, another one might not. And so there's a lot of differences from one accreditor to the next, right? So when CRAC issued its consistent definition of what CBE is, I think that was very helpful. Before that, they all kind of looked at it in a little bit different way and how they defined it, so that consistent definition was helpful. Our member institutions have asked for, and we will be responding at our next national convention, with time just by regional accreditor, and we are asking our regional accreditor to join us so that they can better illustrate. We are looking for one-pagers that would help encapsulate what is it that you really require, because there's a lot of institutions who find themselves confused about, is this a substantive change or is this not? Do you really disincentivize this innovation, or are you really in support of it? I hear one thing from other institutions, but maybe I hear something different from you. So we are getting ready to do a road trip to all of our regional accreditors, myself with a board member from each of those regional accrediting bodies, to try to work on the consistency of language to make it clearer for institutions what the expectations are and kind of that accreditor view on CBE innovation. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Gadkari, a footnote in your testimony highlights 4 programs: CUNY, ASAP, 1 Million Degrees, Arkansas Career Pathways Initiative, and Stay the Course, proven to double or triple graduation rates for students. Could you tell us very quickly how 1 or 2 of these programs operate and what evidence-based practices they engage in to promote student success?
Sure, and let me talk about Arkansas, since that's the one we've probably heard the least about. In Arkansas, they have served 30,000 students over a decade using TANF dollars. It's a program that's running in 22 community colleges across the state, and they have intensive caseload mentoring and advising on the order of 40 to 80 students per caseload. They provide employment support services like resume help. They provide financial support for textbooks, calculators, and supplies, and they provide some financial support for childcare and transportation. So it's, again, this mix of intensive advising and some financial supports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your indulgence.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Nevada, Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Fox, for having this important hearing today about improving equity. I have spent my career working in the K-12 realm with wraparound services, which is why I'm particularly interested in talking about that. You know, Nevada, the majority of our students in our public school system live in poverty, so having that type of program where we provide robust wraparound services is incredibly important. And now we're finding that as those students move on to college, and we have one of the most diverse higher ed programs in the country, continuing those wraparound services is important to their success. A specific program that we've talked about, CUNY's ASAP program, is, as we know, innovative and effective model that provides those wraparound services. And an evaluation by MDRC shows that ASAP nearly doubled graduation rates for students and at a lower cost per degree as well. And recent evaluations show that it's replicable, that we can replicate that model in Ohio, for instance. And in my home state, I'm proud of the Nepantla program, which is, helps our first-generation college students navigate their college experiences by accessing those key wraparound resources, community services, and programming. This model is effective because it leverages that experience and expertise of shareholders, but also walking students through their education program. And Mr. Gidkari, I wanted to ask you, what do you think the biggest barrier is to expanding this model to all community colleges, or all colleges for that matter?
I think the biggest barrier is cost. We are seeing that these programs, and we've talked about 4 of them, they're probably about $1,500 to $2,500 per student per year. Some might fall a little bit outside that range, but that's just a cost that private philanthropy is not going to be able to support at scale. So it's going to have to be up to either states or the federal government to figure out how do we support that cost. I'll note that that cost gets recouped in the MDRC CUNY ASAP model. They actually produce more graduates per dollar than students outside of that program because graduation goes up so much that it's more effective from that standpoint.
And yes, speaking of our federal role, you mentioned that there could be a role. Do you have any specific ideas in particular?
I think that given this body of evidence, a program that scaled up evidence-based approaches around community college supports, perhaps some kind of funding that was kind of in that vein. It may be along the lines of I3 or something like that, but I don't know exactly what it would look like, unfortunately.
Okay. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter in the record this MDRC evaluation.
Without objection.
And I agree. I mean, having the evidence is so important to making sure, and we know that this type of investment definitely has a return on investment. Ms. Long, I appreciate your willingness to share your assessment on what we know and what we still don't know about competency-based education. I've had the opportunity to learn about Western Governors University in Nevada. It's a model that's attracted over 3,300 current students and 3,000 alumni in my state. And I believe that when we explore innovation in different models within our higher education system, we need to consider how these will effectively serve the students of the future. Could you share a little bit more about the variation of CBE's impact on cost and time that it takes students to complete their degree?
Yeah, and again, what we would see is mostly institutional case studies about, specifically how has that happened. In my written testimony, I include information from Salt Lake Community College that's just redesigned 24 of their traditional programs into a CBE format, and I've shared with you kind of the results that they saw both with time, but also the cost. As well as salary data from learners that completed those programs and where they saw salary gains. So there's data from Texas A&M Commerce, a number of institutions that show that they're actually saving both cost and time. What I'd point out is that there are a lot of different models of CBE in the country. Western Governors is probably one of the most well-known, obviously the largest of the models. But various programs design their CBE according to what the specific needs of those learners are that they're wanting to reach. Some of them are online, some of them are not. Some of them target a traditional 18 to 24-year-old learner, and the vast majority of them target something that's not that, right? And so you see a huge, wide model variation around the country. And because of that, we also see very different results. Some aren't as saving as much on time because they want their people to slow down when they, really need that. Others are seeing, more advances in money because they're using a subscription model. So I'd encourage you, as you all begin to really look at the outcomes data, to think about what's that model, because we're still trying to build that data that says if you have these elements, that's what's driving this, outcome result, or this set of elements, that's what's getting this outcome result, if that makes sense. Just want to be transparent. I don't have great, across multiple institution data on what those results look like, just institutional case studies.
Great. Well, I look forward to us working together on that in the
Absolutely.
future. Thank you. I'm past my time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Recognize myself now for 5 minutes and ask Dr. Marwick, you were asked about the $40,000 debt that people come out of community college with. Is that typical?
I don't know any community college where people come out with $40,000 of debt. At Harper College, you can get a 2-year degree for about $16,000. Also, we give students advice not to take loans unless they have to, and we have a less than 8% default rate now.
Thank you. Mr. Gutkerry, you mentioned the programs that you talked about had been studied on randomized trials and had significantly increased graduation rate. Did you talk about how much these programs cost?
Yeah, the costs range from about $1,500 to about $2,500 per student per year. So that's a pretty significant investment, but again, it appears to pay off.
Thank you. Ms. Long, in developing the competencies, is that each institution does their own competency?
Yeah, usually they would start with some sort of a competency framework. So they're going to look and see, is there already a framework in existence? So you might look at the Department of Labor building block model. You might look at DQP, for example, the degree qualification profile. They'll look first to say, is there an established set of competencies for this particular degree or credential that we can leverage? Then they would typically involve employers to breathe in with faculty. What is it that needs to go into the composition? They'll benchmark against other institutions as well to try to create that list.
And the oversight is with the accreditors. They will accredit the list of competencies that you've created?
Absolutely. You explain to the accreditor how you derived your list of competencies. What is that based on?
And how do you determine how many credits you get for certain competencies?
Yep. So the regulations would require us to think about that in the context of a traditional offering. So you have to what we call course walk that or crosswalk that back to what you would offer in a normal program. So if you thought about in a typical communications class, you might have a module that's on written communication, oral communication on these different areas, how much time is spent, and that might be the way in which an institution would decide to allocate
And when you
competency work.
allocate the credits, does the accreditor get to oversee that?
The accreditor, they would be given the information on how they set that information. That would be given to the accreditor during a substantive change process.
And if you come in and show your competencies the first week, do you have to pay for the whole course?
Depends on what kind of a model, but typically, if you're on a subscription model, you would just keep going to the next model, to the next competency, the next to the next, if it's on a subscription model.
Does that mean you have to pay for the whole course?
You're paying for that period of time of learning in a subscription model. So you're paying, say, for example, a 6-month model, and it is a learn as much as you can during that 6 months. So you're trying to demonstrate as many competencies as you can. So it's not like there's a course per se that you're paying for that block of competencies. That's one of those places in which language can get in the way,
but
right?
if you show all of those competencies the first week, do you have to pay for the whole course?
you would be then opened up to new content that you could continue to keep moving onto new competencies.
Dr. LeGrand, can you say a word about the effect that TRIO programs have on the pipeline and completion?
Sure. TRIO programs are important for pipeline and completion. TRIO has two suites of programs, college access-based programs that affect the recruitment of students and preparation of underrepresented populations of students, low-income students of color, and students from disadvantaged backgrounds, preparing them for college preparedness to come to the institution. And then once they get to the institution, there's a suite of programs, TRIO support services programs. We have TRIO support services at VCU that really complements that wraparound services in addition to that academic advising model to make sure those students have everything they need. In fact, programs like TRIO programs create really good evidence-based approaches for institutions in a small scale because those populations are typically 1 in 200 students, that then the institution can think about how do we take this same evidence-based approach and then apply it more broadly across the population. We've seen those evidences at VCU and in other institutions as well.
Thank you. Since the questioning, I remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, materials for submission for the hearing record must be submitted to the committee clerk within 14 days following the last day of the hearing. The material submitted must address the subject matter, and only a member of the committee or invited witness may submit materials for inclusion. Documents are limited to 50 pages each. Documents longer than 50 pages will be incorporated by way of an internet link that may or may not be work in the future. I want to thank our witnesses for participation today. What you've said is very valuable and helpful as we develop the Higher Education Act reauthorization. The committee may have additional questions for you, which we will submit in writing, and we'd ask you to respond in writing. The record will be held open for 14 days in order to receive those responses. I remind my colleagues that pursuant to practice, witness questions for the hearing must be submitted to the majority staff within 7 days. The questions submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. Now recognize the ranking member for her closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our witnesses for their expert testimony. Previous hearings, this Congress exposed how the post-secondary education system is falling short. $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. Fewer than 60% of students complete their programs in 6 years. Fewer than 2 in 5 managers believe graduates are prepared for a job in their field of study. Wow, do we need competency-based education? All education, in my opinion, should be competency-based. Many programs across all sectors of post-secondary education are failing to prepare students to succeed in getting a job that will help them repay their loan debt and rise up the socioeconomic ladder. Bold reform is necessary to reverse these trends, and the hearing today highlighted a few ways colleges can better serve their students. Dual enrollment can increase graduation rates and reduce cost. Intrusive counseling keeps students on track to pursue a career related to their academic program. However, I do wonder, as we sit here and talk about the amount of hand-holding that is required to do as to whether or not we're dealing with adults or not. The term helicopter college comes to my mind as I hear the comments being made. CBE can provide non-traditional students a quicker and less expensive route to gain skills and enter the workforce to fill in-demand jobs. Earn and learn opportunities help students apply lessons in the curriculum, in the classroom, to real-world jobs. I do think we missed an opportunity today to learn more about some of the innovations that are happening outside what we call traditional higher education system. There are providers working to give students skills that are in high demand with employers. Some of these providers are working with colleges, some are working with employers, but all of them are turning the idea of, quote, higher education, end quote, on its head in a positive way for learners. We must broaden, therefore, I think we must broaden our ideas of what post-secondary education looks like to truly meet students where they are in their lives. At the same time, Congress must encourage innovation that helps all students regardless of their background and does not shirk away from providing a high-quality learning experience. The federal government does not have all the answers, and policymakers need to have a little bit of faith in the good actors and creative thinkers on the ground to try new methods to serve students currently being left behind. I wonder what is the purpose of publicly funded colleges and universities if not to meet the needs of the community? Why should we ask federal taxpayers to pay in some states for what other states are providing with state funding, such as dual enrollment, such as helping faculty gain a master's degree in the field without saying, why should federal taxpayers, again, be paying for that? There'll always be an unmet need because the higher we raise financial aid, the higher are the costs for attending colleges and universities. We'll never get rid of the unmet need as long as federal taxpayers are paying for people to go to college. I want to thank Chairman Scott for beginning this bipartisan process. I want to affirm my commitment to continuing this conversation to reform the HEA in the best interest of students and taxpayers. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making a closing statement and comment that Dr. Fox, you mentioned a lot of programs that are short-term that can lead to a good job. We're going to be dealing with those as we reauthorize the WIOA, and that's up for reauthorization next year. So I look forward to working with you on that to make sure that those short-term programs that can lead to they're not leading to a degree, but can lead to a good job are fully available. I'd like to thank again the witnesses for joining us today in the discussion on innovative strategies to advance quality and equity in higher education. This hearing was an important opportunity for us to understand promising approaches to higher education that can help today's diverse students succeed. It was also a reminder that we must ensure that innovation closes rather than exacerbates existing equity gaps in higher education. Today marks the last of 5 bipartisan hearings, which will inform the committee's efforts as we try to pass a reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. Over the last 3 months, we've heard nearly 20 hours of testimony from experts, educators, students, on how to solve the most urgent challenges in higher education. There are several things that we heard: that the federal government must invest in making college more affordable, student loans easier to pay off, that the Department of Education, state authorizers, and accreditors must do a better job at ensuring that only quality programs receive federal funds and taxpayers' dollars. It's especially vital for those entities to hold sectors with consistently low student outcomes to additional oversight. We have to provide students with the support they need to complete their education, not just enroll in college. We must invest in chronically underfunded institutions that educate our most underserved communities. And finally, our hearing today showed that while scaling innovative practices can expand access to higher education for underserved students, innovation cannot come at the expense of quality and equity. With these principles in mind, I look forward to working with our colleagues in the coming months to introduce and advance a comprehensive overhaul of the Higher Education Act that invests in communities, families, and students. And finally, I want to thank Ranking Member Fox and her dedicated staff for engaging in this process. Working across the aisle is not always easy, and we've had our policy differences from time to time. Yet, because of this bipartisan process, each member has had the opportunity to examine research and evidence and have open conversations about needed reforms in higher education. These conversations will be critical in passing a comprehensive Higher Education Act reauthorization that provides every American the opportunity to earn a quality college degree. Is there any further business to come before the committee? If not, the committee stands adjourned.